Chapter 772. Jerry's body temperature rose extremely quickly. Luo Nan felt that Jerry's body temperature had risen by at least 4 or 5 degrees in the span of a few breaths. Luo Nan was proficient in the mental side of perception, so he was able to grasp this bit of precision. The body temperature of a mammal hovered around 37 degrees. Exceeding this range would cause a clear change in the body's functions. Most of the proteins and enzymes within an organism's body would be deactivated when the temperature entered the range of 40 to 41 degrees. The body's various tissues and organs, especially the brain, would be severely damaged. This wasn't a good sign in any case. Jerry? Luo Nan picked up the little fellow and examined it carefully. The little fellow was a bit unwilling. Its 4 limbs struggled and its head kept turning towards the direction of the virtual work area. It looked like it hadn't seen enough. This was quite strange. Any mammal would wither at a temperature above 40 degrees. How could it be like this little fellow, still brimming with vigor? His strength was a bit greater than before. Was this the reason for the distortion? Luo Nan increased the strength in his hand. His palm and fingers slid across Jerry's plump body. There were also high-energy electromagnetic short waves that were transmitted densely. Luo Nan sensed the changes in Jerry's fur, muscles, bones, and even internal organs. Yes, the little fellow's heart was beating very quickly. His muscles were twitching intensely, but they hadn't lost their activity. His control was still there. His blood flow was very smooth. His bodily functions weren't damaged. His body's thermoregulatory center and other cooling functions were still functioning normally. Jerry's body temperature continued to rise during the examination. It had long since surpassed the upper limit that a mammal could endure. Under these circumstances, Jerry's body inevitably underwent some changes. Luo Nan felt that the little fellow's soft fur had become much harder. It was even a bit prickly. Its body seemed to have slightly expanded. Then, where was the pyrogen? It was within the flesh and bones, yet it was outside of the usual functions? This was a bit like an extraordinary power. If he were to use configuration theory to explain it, Luo Nan's mind suddenly went blank for a moment. When he came back to his senses, his thinking pattern and range naturally expanded. He added the element of configuration analysis. He looked at Jerry again. The feeling was completely different from a few seconds ago. The little fellow had transformed from an individual that could be perceived normally into a complex living system. This system possessed a basic mechanism that could guarantee the growth and circulation of life. At the same time, various organizational components were embedded within the logic of a higher-level configuration system. At the very least, there was an intermittent connection. A lot of information flashed through Luo Nan's mind in an instant, but it was very hard to make it clear. Right now, all that was left in his perception was Jerry's body structure, including his flesh and blood, skin and hair, internal organs and bones. Those seemingly right but not quite right details. Just like his previous design in the saltwater lake in the wilderness, there seemed to be no connection at all, but on a higher level, a magical structure was built. Jerry's throat made a goo-goo sound, and he was in a dumbfounded state. The more Luo Nan looked at it, the clearer it became. Under normal circumstances, this sort of structure would not appear. However, under this extreme state of extreme heat, all sorts of minute changes piled up together to form a blurry yet vaguely conforming picture. Why is it blurry? Why does it seem so? Was it innate, or was it modified after birth? Luo Nan's fingertips streaked down from the back of Jerry's head, following along the joints of Jerry's spine. Luo Nan's train of thought gradually became clear. Perhaps it was a problem of growth and development. After all, the cells of a living body changed at an extremely fast rate. Wasn't there a saying, every person is a completely different person from their childhood self? Skin, blood, muscles, and even every cell in the body will undergo a complete renewal at a different frequency. Practically not a single cell in an adult's body was left over from childhood. Humans were like this, and muskrats were the same. Because of this, Luo Nan paid more attention to the nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord. After all, they had the longest lifespans. They were practically unaffected by the changes in growth and development, and they were the most able to embody the main train of thought of this special structure. As his thoughts converged, the distributed image of Jerry's nervous system was mapped into Luo Nan's mind. Luo Nan was limited by the precision of his senses and the level of his clairvoyance. This sort of scan was not completely accurate, But Luo Nan was able to grasp the familiar structure within just by looking at the distribution of fragments. Luo Nan didn't know why he laughed out loud. In fact, right now he was a complete contradiction. His train of thought was clear, but his emotions were even more chaotic. His mental senses steadily deepened, but his hands on Jerry's body were trembling. His control over his strength had problems. What did this sort of test result mean? What did it mean? Jerry suddenly screeched loudly. Luo Nan had strangled him to the point of pain. Luo Nan came back to his senses and hurriedly withdrew his strength. He fiercely blew a few mouthfuls of air at Jerry, who was about to be strangled to death. Then he placed the little fellow upright on the table. The little fellow looked at him stupidly. Luo Nan managed to control his emotions with great difficulty. He stooped down until his face was practically touching Jerry's. "Be good, Jerry. Uncle will help you. Help you sort out a bit." "Goo. Yes. You're the one helping me. Help me." Luo Nan subconsciously used an imperative sentence. The little fellow might not be able to understand, but he was infected by the atmosphere and became abnormally obedient and quiet. Luo Nan took another deep breath and gripped Jerry's body once more. At the same time, his god gear and body gear coupled and interfered. The material plane and the mental plane blended together, forming a slight fluctuation that permeated into Jerry's flesh and blood. Correspondingly, the disjointed configuration elements appeared in front of him one after another. Since Luo Nan had already probed down to the level of the nervous system, he was able to roughly understand the train of thought of the original remodeler. Luo Nan's half-year of high-intensity configuration theory and practical study provided him with a large number of feasible plans. Luo Nan's hand gently caressed Jerry's body, and the little fellow's throat let out a gurgling sound. He had a rather comfortable appearance. He was completely unaware of the earth-shattering changes that were happening to his own body on a certain level. Luo Nan's hand was still shaking at this time. He was unable to control it no matter what, and it was the same on the mental plane. He had no choice but to slow down as much as possible. But the more he did this, the more his overly active mind advanced. He had already predicted the final result halfway through the combing process. Every subsequent change was just a practical verification. Jerry was muddled, and Luo Nan stared intently into its eyes. The little fellow's eyesight was terrible, but it was very comfortable right now. Its eyes were squinted into slits. But as the combing and remodeling process progressed, a layer of marvelous radiance clearly converged between the pupils of Luo Nan's squinted eyes. This was the luster of life energy, and it represented a string of deeply hidden information. The blurry configuration picture became clear and definite under Luo Nan's adjustments. Luo Nan held Jerry in his arms once again without hesitation. He adjusted the direction, letting Jerry look directly at the virtual work area that had always interested him. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. Luo Nan's heart beat more than 30 times in these 3 seconds. The little fellow seemed to feel his urgent mood, and it let out a light cry. Its dazed eyes clearly emitted a tangible radiance that struck the virtual work area in front of it. A marvelous structure expanded from here on out. The external neuron hidden deep within Luo Nan's brain spontaneously emitted a brilliant electric flame. Luo Nan's heart contracted and expanded, and his mind unconsciously became a field of blankness. By the time he came back to his senses, the projected area had already returned to the initial interface of the flexible e-ink screen for some unknown reason. Luo Nan's attention was projected, and the drawing software that had always existed within opened up once more, presenting a blank page. It was as if an invisible hand had painted concise lines on the surface a second later, gradually presenting a brand new interface. Luo Nan was familiar with this sort of situation. The initial design drafts were always like this. Of course, many people were used to using ready-made materials to stitch together. Hand painting was very old-fashioned. Ha! Luo Nan's eyes unconsciously widened as the interface gradually took shape. This interface felt very familiar, yet it was also very strange. He was familiar with the form of the interface. It had an extremely simple and even crude style. There were only 2 options juxtaposed together. Many UI interfaces were like this. Luo Nan had come into contact with one recently. It was the credit evaluation system of the Vagrant Exchange. It was practically the same. However, the words were different. The words used on the hand-drawn interface were the structure and grammar of hieroglyphics, But they were specious. Normal people certainly wouldn't be able to understand them, even if they had been influenced by the East Asian culture for many years. Luo Nan was able to get a general idea because he had been dealing with it recently. These were the words of the virtual brain system. They came from an unknown civilization. Actually, Luo Nan had never learned these words, but the mysterious I character structure that became the core of the formatting theory system was like a translation device. It directly mapped the general meaning into his mind. For example, the current interface presented a sequence of options. The first one meant, "Click on me if you understand it." The next one meant, "It's okay if you don't understand it." This was no doubt a tease, but Luo Nan couldn't laugh. He stared blankly for quite a while. Finally, he reached out and pressed on the first option. The interface, which felt more like a simple design blueprint, actually had an interactive function. The interface immediately changed, switching to a blank page and writing anew. The series of strokes were quite fluent. The fellow who drew the interface should have already grasped this type of language quite well. This string of words belonged to an unknown civilization. It was like the subject of a slide. It was arranged in a relatively large font, occupying the entire interface. If Luo Nan's understanding and translation were correct, then the meaning of the words was, General Education Level Test Simulation System. There was also a line of smaller font below. Chapter 773. Luo Nan was stupefied as he looked at the simple text interface. The large characters on top were fine, but the small characters below were completely incomprehensible. 100-year sequence? What the hell? The external neuron continued to radiate electricity within his brain, showing that it was still in operation. Luo Nan originally believed that the external neuron, which had developed the virtual brain system, had basically exhausted its deep mysteries. But now he discovered that there was clearly a different kind of information hidden at the bottom, and it was being gradually loaded right now. The process of forming the hand-drawn interface was actually the process of loading. 3 seconds later, the words General Education faded away and was replaced by the same hand-drawn, draft-style interface. It was still in a minimalist mode, but the options were a bit more complicated. What appeared in order were the 4 choice categories of culture, society, skills, and true teachings. Luo Nan tried to look at the items under each category before the interface was completely formed. However, the 3 categories of culture, society, skills, and true teachings were completely non-selectable states. At first, Luo Nan believed that it was because the interface hadn't finished loading yet. But when the interface was completely drawn and he tried them one by one, he confirmed that he could only select the True Teachings category and nothing more. There were a total of 5 options on the True Teachings category's second-level menu. If Luo Nan's identification was correct, they were probably internal cultivation, truth-reaching, creation, technique deployment, and configuration. Some of these words were familiar, some were unfamiliar, but they were all brimming with the meaning of extraordinary cultivation. However, only the configuration category was an optional state. There was only one choice, and Luo Nan only chose that one. He clicked once more, and the interface that refreshed this time was no longer in hand-drawn mode. Instead, it was an extremely complex 3-dimensional diagram. It clearly belonged to the domain of the configuration system, but it was only a relatively simple static structure. There were also questions and options on the side of the diagram. This was a freaking multiple-choice question. Please select a basic configuration that is not suitable to be added to the main diagram design. The options were 4 sets of simple configuration diagrams. Ha! Luo Nan laughed involuntarily, but his breath didn't have a hint of happiness. There was only absurdity and resentment. Test me. You test me. You have the face to test me. At this moment, Luo Nan no longer understood who was the one who had set up these mysterious arrangements. His brain had grown for 16 years in vain. He suddenly stood up, his entire body tensed up, to the point that Jerry let out another muffled cry. The little guy's glowing eyes had already deviated from the virtual workspace, but at this time, the hidden database in the external neuron had already been loaded. It didn't matter whether or not the little guy's gaze shone on him. Luo Nan loosened his grip and let the little fellow jump down. This was to prevent Luo Nan from strangling him to death in his excitement. After freeing his hands, he had nowhere to put them. He spun around and finally raised his arms, wanting to grab the non-existent figure in the tree hole where light and shadow intertwined. What kind of lousy joke is this? Luo Nan's muffled roar shook the tree hollow with a buzzing sound, but no one answered him. Jerry had never seen such an uncle before. He shrank in the corner, not daring to show his head. According to the adaptive function, the virtual workspace embedded in the curved tree wall displayed the so-called proficiency test interface. It remained the same. No, that wasn't right either. A blood-red countdown interface suddenly popped up under Luo Nan's manic gaze. There were also corresponding words, no response actions detected. Do you want to give up on this mock exam? It has been detected that the examinee is not suited to the difficulty of the question bank. The version will revert to the popular version. There was still a countdown. It wasn't just in the center of the interface that was conspicuous. There was clearly a countdown for the entire set of questions in the upper left corner of the interface. The basic unit of time in the unknown civilization, if converted to seconds, would be approximately 5 seconds. Luo Nan had looked at the database for a long time, so he could barely recognize these professional symbols like numbers. The total countdown in the upper left corner, when converted to Earth time, was approximately an hour. As for the current countdown timer on the interface, looking at the blood-red characters, it was already the second-to-last character. It would reach 0 in approximately 10 seconds. Even though Luo Nan didn't understand the difference between the verified version and the popular version, and he didn't understand what bullshit the 100-year sequence was, he knew that he couldn't continue being willful under these restrictions. The only thing in front of him was a rigid system, not a living person. He rushed forward with large strides and clicked on the second option before the final flash of the blood-red countdown timer. The exam simulation system calmly flipped the page. The previous blood-red warning was completely erased, revealing the next question. It was another multiple-choice question with drag difficulty. You want to use this to stump me? Reality proved that just looking at the previous foundational questions and making light conclusions was incorrect. Luo Nan's emotions were in turmoil and he wasn't in his best state. But he could feel that many of the questions were quite difficult as he worked through them. Some of them were questions he had never touched before. He could only make hasty judgments due to the time limit. He half gave up and half passed them. Luo Nan didn't know what the passing score for this test was. It was fine if he missed 1 or 2 questions, but he skipped a lot towards the end. His mind gradually grew nervous. He didn't know if he would be able to pass in the end. The test time was approximately an hour, but Luo Nan spent less than 40 minutes to complete it. The reason for this was because the last question was a configuration design. It required the construction of a space module. It required the construction of a miniature spatial fault and the like on the basis of the local space and time. This was the main direction that Luo Nan had been researching for the past half-year. Luo Nan's research had even gone a step further. He had practically created it out of thin air without any foundation to rely on. In comparison, the spatial volume and environmental conditions required for this question were very low. It only required the storage of approximately 1 cubic meter of inanimate objects, and the duration was under 5 minutes. Rather than calling it a space module, it would be better to call it a space bubble. This was the most difficult question at the end. The testing system had set aside approximately half the time for this question. Luo Nan only used 2 minutes to complete this question in addition to the consumption of examining the question and puzzling over it. The unconventional setting of easy, hard, easy caused Luo Nan to come to a realization. It seems like I'm quite partial to a subject. Tests were forever a good method for self-analysis. No matter how emotional Luo Nan was, he was still able to grasp some key information from within. During the course of the test, he was very weak when it came to the application of configurations in the life sciences of unknown civilizations, the material sciences, and even basic general knowledge. However, he had an extremely clear advantage when it came to the simulation of space and time structures, restoration, construction, and other high-end contents. Such a knowledge structure was undoubtedly tempered out from the misty maze and the notes and materials his mother had left behind. In any case, the test ended and Luo Nan pressed the submit option. The results were about to come out. What would come next? People would always place extra expectations on matters that required them to expend their energy. Luo Nan was no exception. He urgently wanted to know the following changes. He pressed his hands against the tabletop and suppressed his surging emotions. He stared fixedly at the interface, his eyes not even blinking. but the entire interface was suddenly cleared clean 2 seconds later. All that was left was a blank area. Not the slightest trace was left behind. Hey! Luo Nan instinctively reached out his hand to touch it. His finger streaked across the projected area, bringing forth chaotic ripples. And at this time, a brand new handwriting appeared. Moreover, it had already been replaced with the words that Luo Nan was familiar with since childhood. Luo Nan's finger retracted as if it had been scorched by fire, making way for the trajectory of the words to appear. He took another step back to expand his field of vision, allowing him to see the meaning of the words more clearly. Pass. You're as smart as I thought you were. 2 exclamation marks were poked there. There was clearly an emotion that soared between the lines of the words. Luo Nan's body was still stiff, but his consciousness was already drifting absent-mindedly. He didn't know how to react. He watched dumbly as the words disappeared and new content appeared. Are you 20 years old right now? 30 years old? Are you married? Do you have children? Is the Earth still in a free state? Or have you already faced the starry sky and entered the 100-year sequence? In any case, being able to find this hidden piece of information amidst a series of coincidences was quite a feat, as a father. I hope that you have read this information in your leisure time while reminiscing about the past. I hope that you have occasionally patched up this missing link while admiring my Messiah-like grandeur. But if you are still a person tangled in pain right now, harboring a loathing for me in your heart, you are struggling amidst the confusing clues, then I ask you to forgive my incompetence. In the end, I wasn't able to realize my predetermined plan. Perhaps I have already foolishly died in forbearance and concealment. It is impossible for me to shine glory into your life. The corner of Luo Nan's mouth twitched slightly. There was a lot of information that he didn't understand, but he didn't have the slightest intention of probing it. He needed to control his surging emotions, to control his heart that was about to explode. He had already exhausted all of his strength. The words continued to appear. I don't have anything else to help you with. I can only show you the path I once walked, the process of me searching for the answer. Though the path is dark and rugged, I know that your mother's soul has always been there. She lent me her talent and wisdom to pave the long road that leads to the ultimate answer within the labyrinth of nothingness. However, my slow-witted self has wasted far too much time in the end. Li Wei, remember this name. This unwelcome guest from beyond the heavens has already arrived. I can only hastily sever this smooth road and welcome an unknown fate. Here I write. I only hope that you will like this present. Happy birthday. The signature was Luo Zhongheng. The date was June 18, 2090. Luo Nan was nailed in place like a stake. He looked at the signature all the way until the interface and the words disappeared. Then a new scene appeared. It was a double helix structure similar to DNA. However, the nodes on it weren't some ATCG. Instead, they were miniature hand-drawn sketches. They seemed to be divided into 2 routes that intertwined and influenced each other. Luo Nan didn't have the heart to look at the specifics. He stood there in a daze until his frantic heartbeat and surging blood made his entire body numb. Only then did he make a move. He subconsciously raised his hand and brought up the perpetual calendar. He found June 18, 2090. His birthday was June 16. Then was this 2 days later. Was it here? It was only a few dozen kilometers away from where he was at the time. Luo Nan took a deep breath. He wanted to go forward and bring up those messages from before. But just as he took a step, his knees inexplicably went soft. He staggered and even bumped into the stool under the table. Heh! He was in such a sorry state. Luo Nan lowered his head and bent his body. He pressed down on the stool and suddenly laughed hoarsely. Is this a whitewash? Luo Zhongheng, you want to whitewash my father? All right, I'll give you a chance. Come out. Come out right now. I can think about it. I can try to forgive you. This is the chance. Come out. Come out. Chapter 774. It's late at night in Ban City. The clouds were still eternally bright, and the originally cloudy environment became even more restless and uneasy because of the sun hanging high in the sky. Snake Tongue floated in the air, her spirit body becoming increasingly illusory and unreal. Sometimes a gust of wind blew, and her figure seemed to fluctuate and disperse, as if she could transform into the clouds at any time. Gongqi was at Snake Tongue's side, listening to the strange collapsing sounds that came from the depths of the surging cold currents of clouds. After a moment, he smiled faintly and said, "The clouds and the sun seem to be in harmony, but in fact, they are far from being separated. It's like this on Earth, and it's even worse here. Two originally unrelated spacetime, for some reason, are continuously interfering and colliding. This is actually a great help to us." Snake Tongue was silent, but the collapsing sounds were becoming increasingly clear. This is the fluctuation transmitted by spacetime interference. Good, very good. Gongqi's spirit body seemed solid, no different from an ordinary person. At this moment, he stretched out his hand and gently plucked at the clouds, intersecting with the vibrations deep in the air. Under the interference collision, the originally hidden and restrained structure of spacetime is revealed. It is necessary to use this to observe and explore. If we can capture traces of the spacetime Earth is in during this time, we can wait until the intensity of the interference collision reaches a certain level. The spacetime structure will change, and the shackles will loosen. That will be a great opportunity to escape. Escape, ha! Snake Tongue's thoughts were finally transmitted. They were faint and weak, but they carried an undisguised mocking tone. So what if it was really as Gongqi said? She hadn't forgotten the silk of silence that covered the outer layer of her spirit body. In the past half a year, this strange item had taken advantage of her weakening day by day to continuously penetrate deep into her spirit body, gathering information and attempting to interfere and control her. If it wasn't for the jade-shattering secret technique that Gongqi was worried about losing everything, perhaps she would have long since been reduced to an artifact spirit. Her life would be worse than death. Even if she truly escaped and returned to the local spacetime of Earth, she would still be Gongqi's captive, and Gongqi would have thousands of methods to deal with her. Her fate would only be more miserable than it was now. Gongqi was well aware of Snake Tongue's attitude and thoughts, but he didn't care in the slightest. He was even a bit more amiable than usual. You have to use your heart. This kind of space-time interference information is a good opportunity that you can't encounter on Earth. It will be beneficial to your future cultivation. Snake Tongue coldly retorted, Secretary General Gong is proficient in spatial teleportation and has a deep understanding of the structure of spacetime. I can't compare to such a foundation and knowledge. Not to mention, my life force is currently dissipating. I can't afford to waste this mental energy. Gongqi laughed involuntarily. Not really, not really. As the saying goes, there's light at the end of the tunnel. Survival in a desperate situation. These words are designed for you and me. This is a rare opportunity. Calm down and carefully experience it. With a buzzing sound, Gongqi's figure disappeared. No one knew where he went. Snake Tongue didn't react in the slightest. However, her spiritual body continued to fluctuate within the surging clouds. Her mind also spread out as it swayed, dispersing into the nothingness. She was used to this state. It was as if she was experiencing a long dream, so much so that she could hardly tell the difference between reality and dreams. Her soul had been cleaved into two halves. One half was above the despairing and lonely clouds. Her life force weakened with each passing day. Her mind was muddled every day, and she had to endure Gongqi's oppression. Every day, she was like a wisp of a remnant soul without any prospects to speak of. She couldn't see any driving force of life. The other half returned to Sakura City. In the hidden environment that she was most proud of, she fused with the fake yet real Kitayama Yuki. She played the role of a retreating artist who was kept as a mistress by a powerful figure in society. This period of her life was much richer. She could walk, sit, and lie like a normal person. She could realize a complete daily routine. She could even go out for a stroll. Shopping wasn't a problem, including online shopping. She could greet and chat with the housewives of the high-class residential district. In the past, this was a boring matter that she couldn't be bothered to deal with. Now, she had a special interest in doing it. Even if those foolish housewives misunderstood her as a despicable person who had lost her financial backer, it didn't matter. In this period of her life, she understood the value of life more than any other time. However, she could only live like a normal person. As long as she had any plans or inclinations that involved the inner world or supernatural powers, she would immediately lose all control over herself. She would once again become a weak spirit, drifting in the sky above Sakura City. She could only watch helplessly as her fleshly body returned to the state of a walking corpse, unable to do anything. After a few foolish attempts, Snake Tongue understood. An invisible hand was manipulating everything she experienced. It was wantonly toying with her will. Suddenly it was heaven, suddenly it was earth, suddenly it was life, and suddenly it was death. It was impossible for her to resist. However, if Snake Tongue was given a chance to choose between the clouds and Sakura City, she would choose the latter without the slightest hesitation. She would choose the latter without the slightest hesitation. Even if the essence of it was that the invisible hand was no different from Gongqi's plans, and it was very likely that it would turn her into a caged canary that could decide her life and death with a single thought, causing her to completely lose the freedom of her body and soul. However, at the very least, she saw a glimmer of hope for survival. In that brief state of spirit and body as one, wisps of vitality, weak but life-threatening energy, came from a channel she couldn't understand and poured into her nearly dried-up spirit body. Her spirit body was on the verge of collapse, replenishing a tiny bit of vitality and extending her life. As for Gongqi, who was also trapped in the clouds, he only wanted to refine her into the yarn of silence. Snake Tongue already couldn't see too far ahead. She only knew that she could still live. She had to live. Just this one condition was enough. And because of this, she had to conceal this secret. I can't let Gongqi know. This was the iron law Snake Tongue had set for herself. She was extremely weak and had long since lost the qualifications to benefit from both sides. In fact, even if she was at her peak, she still wouldn't have the qualifications to face two supernatural powers. Yes, that's right. The person who could penetrate the barrier of space and time and control her life or death was undoubtedly a super powerhouse. She could only entrust her fate to one side. This was a single-choice question, a question of life and death. This absolutely wasn't an easy matter. The yarn of silence was constantly spying on the state of her spirit body. No matter where Gongqi was, he could use this strange item to probe Snake Tongue's specific state. Snake Tongue could only think of every method possible to conceal the traces of the changes brought about by the split-soul dreamland. As for everything else, she would leave it to the heavens to decide. Time should be almost up. The pattern of these dreams was quite strong. They were more or less in accordance with a normal person's daily routine. From morning to nightfall, there would be at least one dream a day. The last time was 20 hours ago. Now that dawn was approaching, perhaps the summoning would come soon. Soon. Cold air whooshed past. The fine sound of bowstrings being drawn rose and fell. Time flowed on like this. 1 hour, 2 hours, 5 hours, 10 hours, and even another 20 hours passed. There was no sign of the expected summoning. Chapter 775. Why? Could it be that this is really a dream? As time passed, the throbbing of her mind became increasingly difficult to control. The conjurer's accurate grasp of time instead turned into the sound of blood flowing after a cut wrist. Drop by drop, it fell into the lake of her heart, allowing the ripples of death to ripple. Snake Tongue floated woodenly in the clouds. The vitality and vital energy she had expected were nowhere to be found. The core of her spirit body, which had just recovered, had a clear feeling of weakness. This was like a tired long-distance runner whose physical strength was exhausted. If they kept running half-dead, they might be able to persevere by relying on the power of habit. But once they rested for a moment and let go of their energy, it would be very difficult to pull themselves together again. Snake Tongue was in such a situation now. She was relying more and more on this vital energy to support her. She could no longer imagine what would happen if she lost this vital energy and this hope again. Stupid, I am too stupid. I should have expressed my attitude to that person in time. I actually wasted such a good opportunity on meaningless probing. If I miss the opportunity, perhaps I will completely miss it. Countless thoughts were born and extinguished in Snake Tongue's mind. Each one seemed to be able to transform into a viper, biting at her will and injecting venom. If there was another chance, Snake Tongue swore that she would not hesitate to beg that powerhouse for mercy, even if she had to beg like a dog. But would there really be another chance? High in the sky, the wind whistled and blew. Her spirit body flashed and extinguished. It could scatter into the clouds at any time, almost out of shape. Snake Tongue's mind gradually fell into a trance. The thread of clarity and decisiveness that she had always maintained for half a year seemed to be melting away. As a result, The veil of silence that had always covered her spirit body immediately reacted. This seemingly formless strange object suddenly tightened and seeped down layer by layer. Snake Tongue awoke in horror. She wanted to summon her remaining strength to struggle, but she had already missed the best opportunity. The defensive dam silently collapsed. The veil of silence's pressure penetrated and scattered her vital energy. It intertwined and fused with her spirit body, becoming one. In an instant, everything had reached a point of no return. Snake Tongue was still desperately trying to reorganize her defensive line to protect the core structure of her spirit body. But this was only a desperate struggle. With her reorganizing speed, she could not keep up with the powerful erosion of the veil of silence. Even the preset jade-shattering secret technique was delayed and wavering. Then, time seemed to have paused for a moment. At the very least, the process of the veil of silence's infiltration had paused for a moment. It was this slight difference that made Snake Tongue's desperate efforts truly worth it. She promptly reorganized her defensive line. Even though she was still in a precarious situation, she was still able to block the seeping pressure of the silent yarn outside the core structure of her spirit body. A faint sizzling sound rang out. Because of the loss of control from before, at least a tenth of the Snake Tongue spirit's body had been vaporized and shattered. It shrunk in size and became even more hazy. However, compared to the fate of becoming an artifact spirit puppet, it was still much better. That was close. The heavens didn't give up on me. No, if I really had the protection of the gods, how could I have fallen to such a state? There's a problem, a big problem. After walking the line between life and death and returning, Snake Tongue's rational core gradually appeared amidst her frightened and despairing emotions. She saw through the details that shouldn't have appeared in the situation where she had almost fallen into the abyss. The veil of silence should have been able to completely refine her. So how could something have gone wrong at the last moment? That was because he still couldn't hide it. With a single thought, she connected all the previous links one after another, forming a logical chain that was gradually becoming complete. At first, Snake Tongue pondered, but then she suddenly began to chuckle. The sound of her laughter became louder and louder, shaking the sky and striking the clouds. It spread far and wide. At this point, the fluke heart hidden in despair and hope vanished into thin air. However, a new thought sprouted, and a large number of roots and branches sprouted, supporting the frail spirit body and channeling new power. What's wrong? My mind is in turmoil. In the midst of Snake Tongue's unbridled laughter, a thought suddenly cut in. The clouds in front of her rolled and soared, and the structure of the void hummed and shook. A second later, Gong Qi's face appeared in the collapsing clouds. His ice-cold willpower pulled out a little more, and the power of an extraordinary would be able to sweep Snake Tongue's frail spirit body into ashes. However, Snake Tongue didn't pay him any attention. Her laughter didn't stop, and she was very happy. Gong Qi's face was calm, as if he had just moved back from afar and didn't know what had just happened. He didn't seem to mind that he had just missed a good opportunity to collect Snake Tongue, nor did he care about her current extremely rude attitude. He only spoke neither quickly nor slowly. When encountering a major event, one must remain calm, especially when hope is in front. In this way, there was almost no difference from 20 hours ago. But now, Snake Tongue heard more meaning. Snake Tongue floated up and laughed in response. I've been trapped here for half a year, but this is the first time I feel that Secretary General Gong truly cares about me and doesn't want me to vanish into thin air. Oh, now you don't even want to be restrained by the veil of silence. About this. When did Secretary General Gong discover this? Which? Gong Qi still wanted to feign ignorance, or perhaps he didn't want to make things clear and cause more trouble, but how could Snake Tongue do as he wished? The outline of Snake Tongue's nearly shapeless spirit body pressed back against her chest. Of course it's the one Secretary General Gong cares about the most. The matter is clearly laid out there. You're a senior with a high position. What's the point of going back and forth like this and that? Their gazes and wills crisscrossed and collided. Although there was a difference in strength, in terms of willpower, Snake Tongue didn't fall into a disadvantageous position for a short time. This was a situation that had never occurred since the two of them had come into contact, but it still happened. One wrong step, and every step was wrong. But he had no choice but to make a mistake. Gong Qi muttered to himself for a moment and finally nodded. That's right, there's nothing to hide. Snake Tongue, I'm very interested in the life force accumulated at the core of your spirit body, the channel through which it came. As expected. Snake Tongue laughed silently. Because of the life force transmitted through the unity of spirit and body, it would inevitably change the spirit body's natural weakening trend. Sooner or later, it would accumulate to the point that Gong Qi couldn't ignore it. This day would come sooner or later. Snake Tongue had tried to conceal it, but she only hoped to escape this cloud prison before Gong Qi sensed it. Unfortunately, in the end, she hadn't made it in time. Gong Qi, this old bastard, naturally didn't slow down because he cherished Snake Tongue's life. Instead, he had misgivings. He had misgivings about the fleeting channel that was connected to her spirit body. Clearly, the words he had said before about the collision of space-time and the loosening of the structure were too much of an exaggeration. Gong Qi didn't have the confidence. At the very least, this old bastard didn't have the confidence to return to Earth after escaping this world. So Gong Qi specifically mentioned the traces of the space-time Earth was in. In this old bastard's calculations, she was a kite. A kite with a string on the other side of Earth. No matter what, the string couldn't be broken. But was the string really still there? What was the plan of the powerful being who was far away on Earth? The one who dominated her life and hope. Yinlu quietly walked into the living area on the lower deck of the yacht. Right now, the lighting in the small living room had already been dimmed. Only the radiance of the projection diffused. Luo Nan sat on the sofa in the small living room. He was like a sculpture. Occasionally, he would move his fingers, change angles, and switch images. He quietly examined the complex structure that could dazzle people. Yinlu didn't dare to disturb him. She just waited at the entrance. Ever since Luo Nan returned to Xia City, Yinlu's sharp senses told her that Luo Nan was a bit different from before when they met again. On the surface, this man seemed to have obtained a complex design from who knows where. It was similar to the double helix structure of DNA. And every node on it was a complex design diagram. After Luo Nan returned, he stared at it in a daze. Sometimes his brows furrowed. Sometimes he would suddenly laugh. His moods were unpredictable. But Yinlu clearly felt that there was a wonderful core within this chaotic state of mind. Especially when he was contemplating. He was truly contemplating. He wasn't thinking like he was facing a big exam. He was racking his brains in a competition. He was more like a philosopher. His thoughts were condensed but not rigid. His thoughts were scattered but not chaotic. His rhythm was much more relaxed. This kind of Luo Nan's behavior pattern was increasingly hard to predict. What happened in the few hours he spent returning to Xia City yesterday? Looking at the current situation, it didn't seem to be too bad. Yinlu really wanted to get to the bottom of this, but as Luo Nan's personal secretary, she needed to keep her duties. She could only restrain her curiosity and wait in silence until Luo Nan's observation came to an end. What happened? Luo Nan didn't turn off the light in the work area. He just tilted his head to ask. Yinlu walked to the side of the sofa. She bowed and answered. Miss Moya took a cruise ship. It arrived at the port at 4 in the afternoon. The person in charge of receiving her was a member of the Banqing Music Festival's organizing committee. Luo Nan should be able to obtain more detailed information about this from Xia City. Yinlu just skimmed over it. She just said the information she obtained through the Blood Flame Orders channels. Miss Moya's fan club is being held at a cultural center near the hotel she's staying at. The scale isn't large. There are about 150 people present. But at the same time the fan club is being held, Yukawa Isuk, the sponsor you reminded us to pay attention to, will be going to inspect the cultural center. The cultural center is the property of Yukawa's family. Luo Nan's lips twitched. What a coincidence. He took the flexible screen Yinlu handed over as he spoke and looked at the relevant information. According to what was shown, Yukawa Isuk wasn't an ability user. But his family had an illustrious reputation in Banqing. They had strong influence in both the military and the political world. They were also very active project investors. They had invested funds in many frontier projects. They could be considered a very standard investor. And then there was Appraiser Jade Association. Luo Nan caught this word he had heard before from Yukawa Isuk's long list of titles. Yinlu's intelligence work could be considered solid. She even added a link to this specific organization. Luo Nan opened it and sized it up a few times. He paid particular attention to the numerous names and their corresponding backgrounds. He suddenly laughed when he was done. Chapter 776. Sister Cat, Mother Cat. Oh no, Granny Cat. For the sake of our friendship, please help me. Zhong Yu's pleading voice was transmitted through electromagnetic waves, passing through thousands of miles of ocean waves to reach Cat Eye's ears. This guy, who had always been thick-skinned, had completely thrown his face into the mud just to beg for an opportunity. I know this is a disgrace. I know this isn't right. I know I'm not qualified, but I'm the only member in Xia City. What can I do when this disgrace falls on my head? Zhong Yu repeated these words over and over again. My request isn't high. I just hope that Mr. Luo can give me a clear answer regarding the invitation. Of course, if I am fortunate enough to travel together with him, then it would be the fortune of 8 generations of my ancestors. How will your father react when he hears this? Even if he lashes me 100 times, he can't take the life of his own son. The Jade Review Conference can take your life? Aren't you a big shot who can talk to Wang Yu? Sister Cat. Sister Cat. Just treat my words as farts. Others may not know what kind of moral character I am, but I can't hide it from you. Yes, they can't take my life, but they can hold down my loans. I'll jump into the sea if the funds for my investments run out. Hee hee, that's a pretty good way to die. Cat Eyes had just walked into the lobby of the hotel. She saw Tang Yi already sitting in the corner of the sofa and greeted her. Tang Yi responded with a smile and immediately got up to greet her. Sister Cat. Zhong Yu's mournful wails became even more miserable. Cat Eyes was disinclined to speak with him any further. Where are you? Acumen College. It's right here at Gear on the north coast. Sister Cat, I knew you would help me. Thank you. Thank you. As long as Mr. Luo is willing. You see that little forest behind Gear? Half a year ago, a fellow named Tank died there. His internal organs ruptured and his flesh turned to mush. Ha! If this isn't enough, there's another fellow named Jean Tong. He's in the sea outside Xia City. Not even his bones remain. If you jump down there, you might be able to find him as a companion. Sister Mao, don't scare me. Hee hee, I'm just reminding you that your father can whip you, the Jade Inspection Association can take your loan, and that person can take your life if he's in a bad mood. For the sake of our friendship, I'll give these words to you for free. You're welcome. Cat Eyes hung up the phone. She frowned slightly. Actually, she was a bit baffled. That shameless bastard Zonggong was nowhere to be found. This proved that Luo Nen really wasn't at Gear on the north bank. That guy had been hiding for almost a week. Where did he go? It wasn't to the extent of completely cutting off contact with the outside world. Could it be that he ran to another city like a few days ago? Then the most likely place for him to go now should be. At this moment, Tang Yi walked to her side and laughed in spite of herself. Overbearing. Yes. Cat Eyes understood that Tang Yi wasn't referring to her attitude. Instead, she was referring to the powerful power that the Jade Review Association represented. That group of people had always been arrogant and proficient in trickery. They loved to scheme against people's hearts. Right now, Zonggong, a minor character with a complicated and subtle relationship, was thrown out in order to provoke Luo Nan. It would be best to provoke Luo Nan into doing something. Then, they would suppress Luo Nan and grind down his spirit. This was an overt plot that was thrown right in Luo Nan's face. Clearly, this group of people were confident that they had Luo Nan's life in their grasp. They were too lazy to conceal anything. Of course, this was also part of the effect of the plot. Luo Nan pretended not to see. Temporarily avoiding them was the right thing to do. He avoided them? Oh, that's right. You can't hold too much hope. Tang Yi laughed involuntarily. She reached out to grab Cat Eyes by the shoulder and walked out of the hotel. Let's go. I'll pay for all of today's expenses. Treat it as thanks in place of Mo Ya. Today was the 3rd day after arriving in Ban City. Early in the morning, Mo Ya, Wild Jujube, and Gauda went to the cultural center across the street to rehearse. She was an intelligent woman. She had interacted with Cat Eyes and the others many times during her 5 days on the cruise. She had already understood her own circumstances. She had just properly relaxed on the cruise. After arriving in Ban City, she had lived in seclusion. Every day, she would only travel between the hotel and the cultural center. This gave the security personnel quite a bit of convenience. As for Cat Eyes and Tang Yi, their mission today was to patrol the surrounding environment, formulate a revised route of retreat, and so on. The two were like best friends going shopping side by side. Tang Yi was taller than Cat Eyes by an entire head. She was used to wearing short hunting clothes, long pants, and brown boots. Her long legs were a complete mess of handsomeness. Even though she was younger than Cat Eyes by 6 or 7 years, her words and actions were calm and unruffled. It was hard to tell her exact age. Cat Eyes was out in the field. Her refreshing attire had the effect of reducing her age. The two walked side by side on the street. It was hard to tell who was the older sister and who was the younger sister. In any case, they were both pleasing to the eye. Cat Eyes really wasn't used to having her shoulders held by others, but Tang Yi was quite familiar with it. She chuckled and said, "If it weren't for that group of people, Emoya would be by my side in an ideal situation." "You put your arms around Emoya's shoulders too? It's fine if we just hold hands." "Your relationship with her is pretty good." "Yeah. We've gotten to know each other ever since Emoya came to Acumen College. I was muddle-headed for many years before that. It's only in recent years that I've been happier. Emoya is a very free and easy person. Only in this way can she live in the rock underground and in our complicated circle. She's not aloof and pretentious, and she doesn't go with the flow. She's still someone that people can't help but like." Cat Eyes wanted to ask if Tang Yi had the guts to tell Luo Nan about the intimate relationship between the two of them. Basically, Cat Eyes was the type of person who respected privacy. Her impression of Tang Yi was pretty good. However, the relationship between her and Luo Nan was extraordinary. Even if she wanted to keep it a secret, sometimes her body and mind were not in control of themselves. A myriad of thoughts ultimately turned into a single sentence. "You're also quite free and easy." "Yeah. Let's go and welcome the future like this." Tang Yi laughed heartily. Though she did not drink, she had the willful and unrestrained nature of being drunk. She was exceptionally eye-catching on the streets of Ban City. Cat Eyes rolled her eyes and Tang Yi suddenly turned her head from the other side. Cat Eyes was a hair too late to react. She turned her gaze as well. At the end of her line of sight was the cultural center where Emoya resided. It wasn't large in scale, and it wasn't a standalone building. It just stood at the corner of the street. It had the intention of being quiet amidst the hustle and bustle. It was very unremarkable. However, there was a familiar figure in a small open-air tea house at the corner of the street. He raised a cup at them with a smile. "Oh, you've met an old friend in a foreign land. Don't you want to drink a cup or two?" Cat Eyes looked at the person in the tea house. His face was dark, and he wore a long khaki windbreaker. He wore a white t-shirt and a pair of ankle boots. He sat there like a big star, radiating light in all directions. But for some unknown reason, she could see the effect of a plain and cold white coat when she looked at his attire. Chapter 777. Cat Eyes, long time no see. Her red lips curled up beneath her sunglasses. Bai Xinyan calmly replied to Cat Eyes. They were both ability users of the world circle of Xia City. Of course, the two of them knew each other, but their friendship was superficial. However, the way Bai Xinyan treated the other person was completely different. She even put down her cup, smiled, stood up, and opened her arms. "Don't you want a hug, Peony?" The corners of Tang Yi's lips curled up, and she stepped forward to give Bai Xinyan a hug. In the East Asian cultural circle, this was already a relatively intimate action. Cat Eyes was quite surprised. "You two know each other?" More than half a year ago, Tang Yi had not officially entered the entertainment circle. Was it because of Her Majesty Empress Wu? Sure enough, this was Bai Xinyan's explanation. "In the past, we were all with Her Majesty Empress Wu, and we all have a standard attractiveness. It's very normal for us to admire each other. Comparing mirrors is much more interesting." Unfortunately, Ying is not here. She's probably here to stab you. Compared to Bai Xinyan, Tang Yi's attitude was a bit calmer. She didn't have any intention of sitting down and having a long conversation. She spoke very straightforwardly. "Last time, you caused trouble and forced that person to explode. You actually dare to come and join in the fun? Cat Eyes knew that Tang Yi was referring to the 2000th Miss incident. Bai Xinyan was the one who let out the news, arousing the greed of countless people. Luo Nan, Rui Wen, and even their entire family were pushed into the teeth of the storm. Were it not for the fact that Xia City had two extraordinaries overseeing it, and that they had promptly sent Jin Tong as a sacrifice to the heavens, as well as Luo Nan's world-shaking speech, it was unknown to what degree the situation would have deteriorated to. Bai Xinyan pretended not to know. I have no choice. I found a new boyfriend, but he's a black-hearted bastard. I can't cure him at all. If I don't destroy a few of his cards, I'll feel like I'm losing out. Tang Yi glanced at her. What about your boyfriend? Bai Xinyan laughed as she waved her hand. Her chestnut-colored hair swayed gently. Under her black hair, her red lips and white teeth were revealed. She had the standard posture of a flirtatious B*TCH. You want that kind of trash to go shopping with a woman? I'll just bring his card. To the side, Cat Eyes thought back to the information she had gathered at the Wild in last time. She coldly said, Isn't it going to be quite difficult to kill them all? Of course not. Don't underestimate a woman's evil thoughts. Bai Xinyan was clearly hinting at something, causing Cat Eye's head to ache. This woman was just like that. Her erratic stance, ruthless methods, and the results of harming others and herself. It was obvious that she could not gain anything from it, but she was never tired of it. Unfortunately, she had an ever-changing temperament. She was able to hold on and let go of things. At this time, she giggled and stuck close to Tang Yi. She directly held onto the crook of Tang Yi's arm. Since we've met, you guys can help me bring disaster to them. Cat Eyes chuckled twice in her heart. She was just about to refuse when she suddenly heard the humming of an engine approaching from above. A rather large motorcade landed on the platform of the high-rise building that belonged to the cultural center. Judging from the banging of the car doors, there were quite a lot of people getting off. Cat Eye's mental senses naturally swept over, and the scene dozens of meters away was taken into her heart. Cat Eyes frowned. It was also at this time that God, who was within the cultural center, contacted her and reported, the upper echelons of the Lean Century have come over for a temporary inspection. I see it. There seems to be another eye-catching guy. This was an unplanned situation, and Cat Eyes was in no mood to mess around with Bai Xinyan. She gave Tang Yi a meaningful glance and coldly said, Thanks to some people, I'm currently out in the field. I'm afraid I don't have the time. It's fine as long as I do. Bai Xinyan held onto Tang Yi's arm and did not let go. Sooner or later, a disaster will always be a disaster. I have nothing to do anyway, so I'll just follow your rhythm. Fine, this person was sticking close. According to Cat Eyes' temperament, she simply could not be bothered to give Bai Xinyan any face. She would just wash her hands and leave. However, there was still Tang Yi in the middle. Tang Yi's expression was calm and tranquil. Her attitude towards Bai Xinyan was completely different, but she never had any intention of pushing Bai Xinyan away. It was clear that there were some tricks that outsiders did not know about. Cat Eyes exchanged glances with Tang Yi once more. They briefly weighed the pros and cons, but in the end, she still curled her lips and walked in front without saying a word. They directly entered the cultural center. From the outside, the cultural center was rather unremarkable. There were not many people inside, but the decorations were exquisite. After entering, a large portion of the clamor of the streets outside was cut off. It was truly the essence of quiet amidst the noise. However, in reality, the atmosphere of this place did not quite match with the rock and roll style of the Mountain Creek Band. The corresponding influence had appeared during the past 2 days of rehearsals. It even directly interfered with the band's song selection. Whether or not the performance was successful was not within the scope of Cat Eyes' concern. Instead, she was deeply curious about the relationship between the two people behind her. Tang Yi and Bai Xinyan walked at the back. At first, Bai Xinyan spoke a few words, but later on, she no longer said anything. The atmosphere was subtle and gradually became oppressive. It was clear that the relationship between them was not as good as Bai Xinyan had described. It would only be more complicated. After the three entered the cultural center, they naturally went in the direction of the concert hall. However, they did not walk far before someone raised their voice and called out to them from the second-floor corridor. Miss Xinyan. The three raised their heads and saw a group of people stopped there. Each of them wore suits and leather shoes, and they looked like business elites. At the head of the group was a middle-sized young man with a dignified appearance. He was currently bowing in greeting from afar. Bai Xinyan smiled and waved her hand. Before she could respond, the young man said a few words to the people beside him. He left the group behind and walked straight down the stairs. It must be said that this was Cat Eye's first time seeing this person. However, she had long since read his information. Even before entering the cultural center, she had used her mental senses to capture and recognize him. Yukawa Aishuk, the main culprit who had invited Moya to Ban City. Tang Yi's arm was still held by Xinyan. She casually asked, "This can't be your boyfriend, right? He can be a spare tire." Bai Xinyan smiled at the rapidly approaching Yukawa Aishuk in a reserved manner. Her mouth, however, was a different matter. She only suppressed her voice. Yukawa Aishuk was completely unaware of this. He walked closer and bowed once more in greeting. "Miss Xinyan, we meet again. Welcome to Ban City. Please allow me to show you my hospitality as a host." Oh, these two are. Following Yukawa Aishuk's gaze, they entered an especially hypocritical mutual introduction period. Looking at this person's eyes, he clearly knew the identity and background of Cat Eyes and Tang Yi. They were the same. Bai Xinyan asked in a casual manner, "Is there an event here today?" The music festival is about to begin. The Ikeda Cultural Center is an important branch venue and needs to be inspected. In the next few days, there will be a series of warm-up performances here. Lin also needs to find moldable talents and unearth new potential. Lies. Bai Xinyan immediately concluded. Yukawa Aishuk did not feel awkward. He maintained a polite smile. "I'm sorry, I didn't manage to hide it from Miss Xinyan. Truth is often impolite. In fact, I think this is a good place to hunt women. I like a free and uninhibited soul with a rhythm." At this moment, the gazes of the three women focused on Yukawa Aishuk's face. Soon after, their gazes converged in the air, transmitting subtle information to each other. Of course, Bai Xinyan's eyes were hidden behind her sunglasses. No one could see through her. Yukawa Aishuk very well blended offense and politeness together. The 6th is the day the Jade Light sets sail. It is also the holiday I set for myself. I hope to bring such a beautiful lady on board and relax for a while. Bai Xinyan asked him again, "Has someone already chosen?" Yukawa Aishuk was about to respond when Cat Eye's wristband vibrated. Cat Eyes swept a glance. The caller was Zhong Yun again. She was too lazy to pick up and directly cut the call. But not even half a second later, her wristband vibrated again. I should add that kid to my blacklist. But when she looked at the caller ID, it was a different person this time. Cat Eyes was slightly startled. She nodded to the others in apology, walked to the side and answered the call. "Hello, Secretary He?" He Yuan on the other side did not say any pleasantries and directly said, "Mr. Luo left Xia City. Where did he go? Did you make any arrangements beforehand?" God knows how many times he had left. Now that he was finally out in the open for once, it really wasn't easy. Cat Eyes cursed in her heart, but of course she could not say these words out loud. She could only continue to play dumb. "Even you as a secretary don't know." "How would I know?" As she spoke, Yukawa Aishuk also received a call a few steps away. That person bowed to Bai Xinyan and Tang Yi. "There are matters that require my attention. I cannot accompany you for a long chat. I am truly sorry. I hope you will give me a chance to remedy this in the future." "Excuse me." Yukawa Aishuk turned around and left after he finished speaking. Even though he did not lack etiquette, it still gave people the feeling that his pace was much more hurried than when he came. Cat Eyes watched his receding figure. Her thoughts were slightly distracted, so much so that He Yuan's crucial words were blurred. She only heard the tail end. "What did you say was in the open sea?" 2 minutes ago, Mr. Luo rode the Flying Devil Ray and moved east into the open sea. His whereabouts are unknown. Ha! Cat Eyes' first thought was nonsense. Don't tell me it's the one raised in the lake in front of Gear on the north bank. That's it. Impossible. That Luo fellow wanted to leave Xia City. He didn't need too many methods. Why did he use this method? Just imagining such a scene made Cat Eyes feel that it was extremely absurd. That Devil Ray looks intimidating, it looks cool, and its destructive power is quite strong, but in the end, it's still a sea creature. Even if it's a mutant and has the ability to fly, the branch has measured its flying speed. It can fly at most 70 to 80 kilometers per hour. It's not even as fast as a flying car. 2 minutes. 2 minutes might not even be enough to get out of Acumen College. The Pingjiang district is over 100 kilometers away from the sea. You really don't know? How would I know? He Yuan did not say anything else. She just sent over a video file. Cat Eyes immediately opened it. At this time, Tang Yi and Bai Xinyan walked over, one on the left and one on the right. The three women gathered together and were extremely close. They did not care about anything else. They only looked at the small projection area. The original image was probably a random shot by a passerby. The ambient noise was very noisy, but the anti-shake lens was very powerful. It clearly projected a white scar that continuously advanced forward, cutting through the horizon. Judging from its height, it was at least 1,000 meters. When the camera zoomed in, the person who recorded it immediately burst out with profanity. "Fuck me." Chapter 778. After saying goodbye to Bai Xinyan and the others, Yukawa Aishuk did not join up with the mighty patrol team. Instead, he went directly to the upper level of the cultural center, to a temporary private room. In here, he turned on the projection system and silently looked at the video data from various channels. The angles, sharpness, and duration of these videos were all different. But the core content of the video was, without exception, the sky above Xia City, the dazzling flight trail. The advantage of piling up data was that there was more information than appearing through a single channel. This set of video data started from when Luo Nan stepped out of gear on the north bank, shook off Zhong Lang, and boarded the Flying Devil Ray all the way until he entered the sea outside Xia City. The entire process was recorded. The internal intelligence analyst of the corporation listed out the information revealed in the series of videos one by one. Target flight distance 134 kilometers. Target flight speed, Mach 2. 5 average speed. Maximum speed, Mach 4. The Devil Ray's limbs are in an unnatural state. High probability is that it is only a carrier of energy operation. Flight altitude, temperature, and surrounding atmospheric environment do not meet the conditions for a flight trail. It is suspected that there is a large amount of water vapor gathering beforehand. The analyzed data elements were extremely detailed. It looked like Luo Nan had been thoroughly dissected inside and out. A countermeasure could be formulated at any time. But reality was far from this. Yukawa Aishuk only skimmed through the video analysis data once. His mind was elsewhere. But after these videos, after flying out of Xia City, it went straight to the bottom of the sea. Its whereabouts are unknown. This was the result of integrating a large amount of intelligence data. Yukawa Aishuk furrowed his brows. His expression was as heavy as water. Ban City and Xia City were only 1,500 kilometers apart. With the speed of the Flying Devil Ray, it would take half an hour to reach Xia City. If this was the case, then it would save him a lot of trouble. Even if it was a nuclear bomb, it would be exposed to the satellite, radar, and other monitoring systems. There would be people to deal with it. But after Luo Nan flew out of Xia City, he went straight to the bottom of the sea. This move alone turned 70 to 80% of the satellite and radar equipment into scrap. After entering the sea, it was unknown what method he had used, but a living person and a mutant with vigorous vitality had disappeared without alerting the sonar array and various monitoring systems at the bottom of the sea. They had disappeared without a trace just like that. If this was the case, then things were really troublesome. While Yukawa Aishuk was deep in thought, there was a knock on the door. After receiving permission, the group's intelligence analysis section chief, Takamoto Shigeru, quietly entered. This lean middle-aged man was Yukawa Aishuk's confidant, and was also in charge of handling the most sensitive issues. After entering, Takamoto Shigeru immediately expressed his concern. "President, there's a lot of bad news going around about you." Yukawa Hidesuk slightly waved his hand, interrupting Luo Nan's words. He just asked, where in the world did Luo Nan go? Takamoto Shigeru stood upright. "I'm sorry, but we haven't been able to find any traces of him." "Why?" Yukawa Aishuk stared at his confidant. Luo Nan can conceal his aura, but the Devil Ray is a huge target. In terms of the strength of his blood energy, it's almost at the B rank standard. The outer seas are the domain of the marine aberrations, and they are very densely distributed. As long as it enters the domain of other aberrations, it will definitely cause conflict. There is no way it can hide. Before Yukawa Aishuk could finish his sentence, a call came in on the secret line. It must be said that he possessed an astonishing amount of influence in Ban City, but the people who were able to fight their way into this line were not easy to deal with. He could only split his attention to deal with it. The moment the call connected, the person on the other side asked, "Tomokawa-kun, have you heard the news that the Cage Master is coming to Ban City? A powerful A-rank threat could enter the country illegally at any time. Governor Do is very worried about this." Yukawa Aishuk furrowed his brows, but his tone was very calm. "Kondo-kun, I am also paying close attention to this news. However, in a similar situation, we can only obtain more detailed information by consulting the military. On my side, isn't it Tomokawa-kun who invited that person's relative to perform in Ban City? Governor Do believes that you have a good relationship with that person, so he hopes to express his concern through Tomokawa-kun." Yukawa Aishuk's gaze was ice-cold when he heard this. He swept his gaze across Takamoto Shigeru's face, and Takamoto nodded slightly, indicating that this was what he wanted to say earlier. Great waves of emotions churned in Yukawa Aishuk's heart. He managed to deal with Governor Do's loyal dog with great difficulty. He hung up the phone and stared at Takamoto Shigeru. "Someone is deliberately spreading the news that I invited Moya to participate in the music festival? Having a smart boss would save a lot of time and effort." Of course, Takamoto Shigeru couldn't simply go along with this. He spoke of the details. "Apologies, President. The news spreads very quickly. It happened before this incident. Therefore, the intelligence department believed that the Jade Society was deliberately spreading the news. They were still coordinating and communicating with each other, but things got out of hand because of Luo Nan's flight." Before this, Yukawa Aishuk rewound the video and rewatched the first half of the video, especially the entire process of Luo Nan coming out of gear on the north bank, forcefully shaking off Zonggong's entanglement, and summoning the Flying Devil Ray. Luo Nan's face was cold the entire time. It could even be said that he was expressionless. It was in line with his usual reserved persona, but according to Takamoto Shigeru, there was clearly a deeper meaning behind this. He's putting on an act? Did he plan all of this? There's no problem logically. Takamoto Shigeru spoke in a low voice. There's a lot of news right now that Moya's personal freedom has been restricted. Add the stimulation from the Wilderness Laboratory, and Luo Nan will react intensely to this. This includes but is not limited to carrying out an unrestrained large-scale conflict in Ban City, attacking the Jade Light Cruise, assassinating related personnel, and so on. Since his whereabouts are unknown right now, he's given too much room for imagination. Plus, the infrasonic wave ability that Luo Nan developed for the Flying Devil Ray is a serious threat to ability users under B rank. This is especially true for the majority of people in the secular world. If he uses this weapon, if he dares to use this weapon, he's dead for sure. Yukawa Aishuk slammed the table heavily. The Ban City Ability User Branch, the Ban City branch of every order, and the headquarters of the Amaterasu Order. There are plenty of powerful people who can kill him. Takamoto Shigeru really wanted to remind his president that the only people in Ban City who could truly kill Luo Nan were the two extraordinaries of the Amaterasu Order. But the words came to his mouth. But he hasn't displayed any clear inclination up until now. This was where Luo Nan was the smartest. Chapter 779. There's no news of Luo Nan's whereabouts at the moment. Okay, we'll keep in touch. I'm not the organizer of the auction, but I will communicate with the Toyama auction house about the relevant matters. Hino-kun, if you've seen the video, you should know that it's impossible to maintain that speed for a long time. Otherwise, why would he hide under the sea? My opinion isn't important. This is the analysis of a professional. After a few rounds of phone calls, Yukawa Aishuk's head was about to explode. Just now, someone actually asked him if he could get the Jade Light to set sail ahead of schedule to help Ban City escape from the center of the hurricane. Were those idiots joking? The problem was that the people who called didn't think so at all. To them, it was a matter of life and death. Ignoring it would be the greatest joke. After being bombarded by all sides, Yukawa Aishuk could not help but feel restless. It was without a doubt that the more brilliant Luo Nan's response was, the more his sorry state was manifested. This was a situation that Luo Nan had never thought of when he had designed the entire plan. Driven by his terrible mood, Yukawa Aishuk silently clenched his teeth. He forced himself to remain calm and tried to mock Luo Nan. Luo Nan sure is ruthless. I don't know how far away he is from Ban City, but I'm closer to his sister. Bastard! At the end of his sentence, Yukawa Aishuk cursed, mostly at himself. He had obviously lost his composure. His words were seriously out of character, and from the most realistic point of view, he really did not have the confidence to do so. The Luo Nan from the intelligence reports was a fellow who could do anything. It was true that the Yuchuan family was a large family with a large business, but the foundation of their business was still in Ban City. If Luo Nan really were to disregard everything and use infrasonic waves to cleanse the land, Luo Nan might not be able to live after this, but the Yuchuan family would basically be removed from the list of powers with global influence. He would only be asking to be humiliated if he didn't tear off all the feathers and feathers on that brat's body. Takamoto Shigeru lowered his head in silence, giving Yukawa Aishuk a chance to adjust himself. Yukawa Aishuk took a deep breath and closed his eyes. The sudden darkness stimulated his imagination to a certain extent. He felt as if he had touched a spider web between the branches and leaves. He thought he could brush it off easily, but he did not expect the web to be so sticky and entangled him. He wanted to break free, but when he turned his head, he met the cold eyes of the spider. After a brief moment of absent-mindedness, Yukawa Aishuk's thoughts continued to flow. He had underestimated Luo Nan before. In the end, the information obtained from the intelligence reports was still not solid enough. In other words, it did not reflect his growth and progress during this period of time. Now that he had suffered this move, he finally understood a little. However, being stung was truly painful. Yukawa Aishuk slammed the table heavily. His emotions had not calmed down yet. The childish face in the intelligence report appeared clearly again. It blended together with the spider in his imagination, slowly changing and correcting itself. Actually, many people had to revise their impressions of Luo Nan from this moment on. Similarly, in Ban City, on the Ray yacht on Beishan Lake, the lights in the living area of the lower deck were habitually extinguished. Only the projection light propped up a semi-illusory light screen. There was a complex configuration picture on it, but it had been on for a long time. Luo Nan's head leaned back, the back of his neck resting against the back of the sofa. His eyelids were closed, seeming to have already fallen asleep. Maybe he's too tired, Inla thought. It seemed that Luo Nan hadn't slept for over 40 hours. He didn't do his exoskeleton armor training anymore. His entire mind was placed on the double helix structure. Plus, the frequency of his trips to Xia City had increased by a lot. He had just returned. It was this trip that gave Inlu a fright. How in the world did he do it? Everything that Luo Nan did in the past few hours was far too horrifying. The flying devil ray that forcefully accelerated to Mach 4 mysteriously disappeared after entering the sea. Then, Luo Nan appeared on Beishan Lake in Ban City a few minutes later. The latter could be explained by the mysteries of the transmission array. But how could one explain the mysterious disappearance of the devil ray that soared into the sky? Also, the mysterious and unfathomable methods, the urgent steps, and the drumbeat were clearly signs of an impending storm. But Luo Nan had yet to make it clear where his target was. Clearly she, his temporary personal secretary, Mrs. Holder, who was far away in T-City, and the entire Blood Flame Order had yet to obtain Luo Nan's complete trust. Or perhaps, they had yet to rise to the level he needed. Yin Li's mind was filled with thoughts, but she did not dare to disturb him. She wanted to return to the attendant room to get some things, so she quietly made her way over. But when she passed behind the sofa, she suddenly felt something abnormal. The temperature of the air, or more accurately, the temperature of the air surrounding Luo Nan, had clearly risen. The natural flow of heat was clearly under some sort of control. There were no abnormalities within a meter, so Inlu had not discovered it before. But at this moment, Inlu borrowed the dusky light to faintly see that Luo Nan's complexion was off. An abnormal layer of dark red spread to every inch of his skin as far as the eye could see. This couldn't be a fever. Did something go wrong with his cultivation? The thought flashed through her mind, and Yin Li's heart tightened. She subconsciously extended her hand to touch Luo Nan's forehead. She was just a few centimeters away from touching Luo Nan when the skin on her fingertips actually felt a scorching sensation. This was a disaster. Yin Li suddenly retracted her hand. Aside from being shocked, she also recalled that this was a critical symptom. She absolutely could not allow any external stimulation. She took a step back, wanting to report to Mrs. Holder. If Luo Nan was sick, he could find a doctor. There were doctors on the yacht. But if there were problems with his cultivation, he could only rely on a senior figure in this field. The dark room suddenly lit up at this moment. Yin Lu instinctively raised her head and saw Luo Nan open his eyes. The light that illuminated the dark room seemed to have shot out from the depths of his eyes. Was it a hallucination? What's the matter? Luo Nan's tone was flat, forming a stark contrast with the heat that bubbled around his body. Mister, just now you. Yin Lu did not know how to describe it. Oh, I was gathering energy. Ha! Luo Nan turned his head, and his gaze pointed forward. However, it was not focused on a certain place. His clairvoyance was focused on the depths of the void. There were countless threads of light crisscrossing. The layers of light converged to form a deep spiderweb structure. Bloody light followed the direction of the threads on the spiderweb structure, pouring into countless nodes. Then it spread and grew from there, intersecting with each other. This was the altar spiderweb constructed by the Wraith sign. However, this was the control system presented by the feedback of Luo Nan Qi, which had probed into the human heart. Chapter 780. Luo Nan's improved control system was a great improvement over the original altar spiderweb's extensive model of the victor notifies the loser and the loser dies. Luo Nan's own design ideas were added in. Now, his thought process had almost become instinctive. He paid more attention to rational control and had his own set of rules and laws. Right now, the new version of the altar spiderweb was like the cotton candy machine that he saw in the Museum of Life when he was a child. A small stick was stirred in the machine, and countless visible and invisible sugar threads were entangled, forming an amazing creation that was as white as a cloud. Luo Nan was that small wooden stick. He used the Luo Nan ruler to probe the heaven and earth, the universe, and the myriad phenomena of the human heart. He transferred and absorbed power from within. Regardless of whether the power came from the mighty force of heaven and earth or the turbid flow of the human heart, they were just crude raw materials that had to be broken and reassembled into sugar threads. Then they would intertwine and form different clouds. With himself as the foundation, they would form a more delicate, dense, and sturdy structure. Heaven, earth, time, space, human nature, I am the central axis. Luo Nan was still a distance away from being able to completely control this power, but he was still progressing in the end. He had already gained a wealth of experience from Madame Halder, Cat Eyes, and the others. All he was doing was constantly searching for more effective configurations to utilize. Now, it was finally time to show his strength. Luo Nan took a deep breath, carefully adjusting the state of his fleshly body. In today's world, information traveled far and wide. Luo Nan's soul cloak covered the entire world. The control network built on this foundation could be said to be a natural gathering of power. Because of this, the vitality and yuan qi flowing on the spider web on the altar and the even more intangible soul power only accumulated for a short period of time, but it was already enough to make him, the mastermind behind the scenes who was taking advantage of the situation, eat too much. Now, the divine chakra and the body chakra were coupled, and the body and soul interacted with each other. Both were reciprocating each other, maintaining a basic balance. But as the accumulated power continued to rise, the upper limit of what his body could bear was also reached. If he continued to devour, there was a risk that the framework of his body and soul would lose balance. Fortunately, Luo Nan had made countless adjustments and experiments over the past few months. His body and soul frame had gradually grown accustomed to the pressure of this sudden rise. Even if there were still various inadequacies, it would be enough for the time being. Besides, to deal with Gong Qi, he had to give up something. Luo Nan suppressed his body and soul frame. It was hard to avoid some blood and energy anomalies. Yin Lu was trembling with fear as she watched from behind. In the end, she couldn't help but say, Sir, are you sure it's okay? What problem can I have? At this critical moment, Luo Nan's state of mind actually relaxed. He casually teased Lu. I see that you have quite a lot of questions. Do you want to ask? Lu was completely caught in Luo Nan's rhythm. Her mind was absent-minded and she blurted out, Where's the flying devil ray? Oh, that guy. I'll have to trouble you then. Luo Nan thought of something when Lu mentioned it. He flipped his wrist and magically took out a crystal ball and held it in his palm. Catch. Luo Nan didn't even turn his head as he tossed the crystal ball behind him. The latter instinctively reached out to catch it, but he felt that it was as light as a feather and lacked texture, as if it was made of fine yarn. It felt very strange, so he raised it in front of his eyes and examined it with the help of the light from the projection. The crystal ball was about the size of a baby's fist. Like many similar products, there was a small object sealed inside that was still moving. Lu took a closer look, and in the next second her body stiffened. The devil ray. The object sealed inside the crystal ball was about half a centimeter long. It was very miniature, but it had wide wings and a long tail. It had a head fin on top, and its body was flat. It was a miniature version of the devil ray. Upon closer inspection, one could even see the electricity radiating from its tail. Yes, it was the mutated devil ray that Luo Nan had subdued. It was the vicious monster that caused the people of the inner world, even Xia City and Ban City, to be panic-stricken. But Luo Nan was the real monster for this kind of operation. Mister, this is? Lu stuttered. It's that devil ray. But how did it? Well, I stored some seawater and fish in the ocean. I sealed it together with the devil ray into a spatial fault. Right now, this crystal ball is just a speculum. It will reflect the image within the fault. Don't worry about breaking it. It won't be able to escape. Luo Nan finally turned his head and gave instructions. However, there are some flaws in the design of the fault. It won't last long, and the environment is vile. That fellow is quite stifled inside. Also, I just strengthened it, so its skeleton structure is a bit mutated. It needs to be nourished, so I need to let it out to get some fresh air. It just so happens that North Mountain Lake is a suitable environment. I'll leave this job to you. Lu was stunned speechless. Luo Nan took it as her tacit agreement. He continued, In a bit, I'll map the exit onto the crystal ball. You just need to take it and wander around the lake a couple of times. You need to avoid the more troublesome territories of the mutants to avoid a fight between the two sides. It'll be too loud and draw suspicion. It was impossible for Lu to refuse, but she still tried to figure out the core logic. How in the world did you do this? Luo Nan thought for a moment and replied, Just do more questions. The results will be even better if you practice it for a long time. Lu believed that Luo Nan was just casually answering her. Little did she know that Luo Nan was speaking the 100% truth. The so-called doing questions was none other than the general education level test simulation system that Luo Nan had dug out from the tree hole. To be more precise, it was the enormous question bank that the system was equipped with. Luo Nan was still unable to crack this simulation system. However, he had participated in the test over and over again. He was always able to see a few extremely ingenious configuration questions, and they were extremely well integrated with real problems. Over and over again, he was continuously polishing his thoughts. And the standard answers to these questions were tantamount to secret configuration techniques in a certain sense. Unfortunately, time was too tight. There were some opportunities that would never appear again once they were lost. There were some problems that would only become more thorny as time passed. He couldn't drag things on with the cloud world any longer. Luo Nan turned his head around and leaned against the sofa. He assumed a comfortable posture. I want to ask you about something. What do you think your boss will be able to do to break through the bottleneck of his cultivation? Lu was more or less used to Luo Nan's drastic change in topic. She soon switched her field of thought and recalled Mrs. Holder's masochistic cultivation over the past half-year. He can practically give up everything. Including his life? Forget it. I'll just ask her directly. Luo Nan could completely sense Mrs. Holder's location through the Blood Soul Temple of the Abyss District and directly communicate with her. Lu didn't want to participate in the specifics, but Luo Nan didn't have any intentions of hiding it. He just treated it as a phone call. He spoke word by word clearly. Mrs. Holder, there's an uncertain opportunity that may allow you to break through your shackles. Are you interested? Luo Nan switched to the projected image in front of him at this time. The configuration blueprint was replaced with an electronic sand table that covered the entire globe's topographic mapping information. Such a work was most likely from the military. It wasn't strange for Luo Nan to have a copy with his current status. But what use was he taking it out for? Luo Nan shrunk the electronic sand table to its smallest size. The highly realistic 3D image converged and slowly rotated in the virtual work area. It was as if the entire planet was placed in the palm of his hand. Then he tapped with his finger. Lu was very familiar with the location he tapped at. T-City. Luo Nan chose Mercenary City in the Pacific Ocean. His mouth was still talking to Mrs. Holder. Yes. Of course there's a price. There's a possibility of death. Lu really didn't know what Mrs. Holder's response was. But the smile on Luo Nan's face clearly indicated his inclination. Excellent. Then please make a long trip. Go here. Luo Nan rotated the Earth. From the deep blue Pacific Ocean, he instantly arrived at the plateau region of South Central Asia. He lit up his Mach once more, forming a dark red dot. You'll be pleasantly surprised. However, it most likely won't have a decisive effect. You need to wait. You also need some luck. What Luo Nan didn't say was that those two were also waiting high above the distant clouds. They also needed luck. It was just that these elements all needed to be controlled and given to by him. Snake Tongue's spirit body shrunk into a ball high above the clouds. She curled up in the yarn of silence, protecting a bit of her core. She also endured the nourishment and infiltration of external forces. Right now, it was Gong Qi's turn to inject vitality into Snake Tongue. It was just that the requirements for vitality on the spiritual level were too harsh. External forces could only treat the symptoms but not the root cause. Even if he poured in all his strength, it would be pretty good if he could use a single point out of 10 points. This required Snake Tongue's cooperation. But how could Snake Tongue possibly cooperate with him? Even though she was certain that Gong Qi needed to protect her psychic awareness from being extinguished in order to search for clues, it was impossible for her to escape unscathed now that her secret had been discovered. Snake Tongue's mental state was collapsing badly. She was certain, yet she was in despair, and she was rejoicing in Luo Nan's misfortune. Overall, Gong Qi was quite calm. At least he was calm in front of Snake Tongue. He had already come to a partial conclusion after a period of examination and deduction. He tried to communicate with Snake Tongue. Looking at your situation, it's very likely that there's such a person in the space and time where Earth is located. He should be proficient in soul summoning, and similar spells. Due to certain reasons, he discovered your hidden corporeal body. He also discovered your out-of-body situation. For some unknown reason, he used soul summoning to establish a connection with your soul through your corporeal body. After all, the marvelous connection between the body and the soul is unfathomable. It's hard to thoroughly investigate. Even if it penetrates the barrier of space and time and affects this cloud world, it's still unknown. Snake Tongue didn't respond at all. Gong Qi minded his own business and continued speaking. No matter what, it at least proves that the cloud world isn't a sealed-off world. There is a way to interact with the outside world. What we need to find right now is the trajectory of this interaction. That is also our path home. 2 specks of ghostly flames lit up within the yarn of silence. It was Snake Tongue's ice-cold gaze. This path is already severed. The person you're imagining, even if there really is such a person, has already given up trying. Perhaps he's already discovered your ambush here. Not necessarily. Not necessarily. Gong Qi laughed calmly. For him to be able to fuse your soul and body, his methods are indeed superb. But without a soul item like the yarn of silence as an anchor, I don't believe that he could conveniently extend his tentacles into this world. Under normal circumstances, who would think that such a marvelous plane of space and time existed? I'm more inclined to believe that he's currently making meticulous arrangements and preparing a new ritual. He's preparing to do more with your corporeal body. Snake Tongue recalled her dreamland experience, but she felt that it was completely different. She couldn't help but sneer. Secretary Gong is really... Halfway through her words, her divine sense was suddenly covered in a layer of hazy mist. It was as if a mirage was revolving around her, reflecting a marvelous scene. The dense mist didn't disperse. Chapter 781. This is it. Gong Chi caught the change in Snake Tongue's body in the first instant. His figure closed in, but he didn't interfere. Instead, he carefully observed the aftermath. But on the other side, Snake Tongue had a rather subtle feeling. This was because it wasn't quite the same as before. Her soul had split and a wisp of her soul had returned to Ban City. Instead, the Mirage Chi fog wall was growing thicker and thicker. Moreover, it wasn't only on the plane of her consciousness. It directly affected the material plane and appeared in the cloud world. Could it be as Gong Chi had said? That the powerhouse far away in Earth space-time had made meticulous preparations these past few days and changed a method to work on her body? But why was there no pulling force between her soul and flesh for so long? Snake Tongue wanted to contact that person and seize the opportunity to issue a warning. She also wanted to beg that person to help her break away from the clouds and escape Gong Chi's control. No matter what kind of fate awaited her later, as long as she changed her way of living, or even how she died, she could accept it. However, that powerhouse on Earth didn't give her this opportunity. The Mirage Chi fog wall grew thicker and thicker. She hoped for Ban City and the fusion of her soul and flesh, but she still couldn't see a shadow. She didn't know what had gone wrong. Right now, you. Gong Chi drifted over and spoke to her. Just as he opened his mouth, his voice and transmitted thoughts suddenly became indistinct. It was as if there really was a thick curtain wall separating them, making them indistinct and indistinct. This was a situation neither Snake Tongue nor Gong Chi had expected. Before they could react, the Mirage Chi fog wall rumbled and surged. It erupted and flowed, cutting off their line of sight. As for Snake Tongue, she felt a heavy attractive force appear out of nowhere and act upon her spiritual body. In the blink of an eye, Snake Tongue and Gong Chi had unexpectedly become isolated from each other. Moreover, this attractive force. Snake Tongue. The brief thought was like an ice-cold thorn. It forcefully broke through the Mirage Chi fog wall and pierced inside. Snake Tongue's mind was muddled. Gong Chi instantly exploded with a chill that could nearly freeze her. He suspects me. That this was premeditated? It would be great if there was. Because of Gong Chi's reaction, Snake Tongue suddenly had a flash of inspiration. She no longer cared about the other side. She didn't think too much, and she didn't care about her wording. She frantically radiated her thoughts and spirit waves, revealing everything that was going on in her heart. Save me. Save me. No matter what you want to do, no matter what you arrange, I don't want to die. I don't want to become a puppet. Save me. The Mirage fog wall completely isolated Gong Chi's figure and weakened his will, allowing Snake Tongue's courage to recover. The heavy suction force that had been in effect from beginning to end caused the hope in her heart to grow crazily. She tried her best to radiate her psychic waves, all for a response. Snake Tongue. Gong Chi's will penetrated the fog wall for the second time. Even though it was blocked by the Mirage fog wall, his killing intent was clearly transmitted, and then the fog wall shook. That was the impact from Gong Chi. The ice-cold emotions and the power of an extraordinary forcefully distorted the fog wall, allowing bone-piercing cold air to penetrate inside and create howling winds. Under this attack, Snake Tongue's spirit body was like a candle flame swaying in the wind. She could be extinguished at any moment. In reality, under such an impact, she had already lost the ability to think deeply. She could only instinctively continue crying for help, and there was no other reaction. It was also at this time that Gong Chi took advantage of the fact that he had yet to break through the wall of fog. He poured his thoughts into it, and the yarn of silence around Snake Tongue's spirit body began to exert strength. It suddenly contracted and compressed, attempting to cut off her path of life. My lord! My lord! Snake Tongue used the honorifics of Sakura City to continue crying and praying. Fortunately, the surrounding fog wall interfered with Gong Chi's control over the yarn of silence. She was able to slow down for a moment, and her already extremely weak spirit body contracted once more, barely condensing into a sphere of light. For this reason, she even abandoned a portion of her spirit body's structure, thus obtaining a few seconds of breathing space. However, after a short period of breathing space, what Snake Tongue waited for wasn't a helping hand from her lord. Instead, it was Gong Chi's cold and gloomy voice. Aren't you thinking too much? A greenish-gray color rapidly spread above the mirage fog wall. Everywhere it passed, the surging fog froze and lost its vitality. Soon after, the claw reached in, and the fog wall opened. Gongqi brought out his true ability. The greenish-gray glowing fog that had been gathering and dispersing outside of his spirit body was the pure essence energy he cultivated with his life. It froze all the changes in the fog wall, causing it to shatter with a bang. Snake Tongue had already consumed a large portion of her vital energy. She was completely unable to react. She could only look on helplessly as the claw rapidly approached, about to crush her spirit body. But at this moment, Snake Tongue's consciousness blurred once more. The strange suction force that had been acting on her spirit body finally accumulated enough power. The quantitative change caused a qualitative change. Behind her, an incorporeal hole suddenly opened. The grayish-white color seeped out from inside and rapidly spread, swallowing her up before immediately contracting. There was only a thin line separating them, but Gongqi's entire figure broke through the fog wall and pressed over. He also saw the spreading and shrinking colors, as well as the inconceivable hole in the clouds in the void. The hole wasn't large to begin with. It was just large enough to swallow Snake Tongue's extremely condensed spirit body. Judging purely by his eyes, he could at most extend an arm through it. Furthermore, it was rapidly shrinking. It looked like it was about to disappear into the drifting mist. Gongqi didn't have time to think too much. His figure distorted into light and accelerated once more. He practically stuck close to Snake Tongue's spirit body and crashed into the hole together. The sky suddenly darkened. In the instant of this change, Gongqi was already 100% certain that he could capture Snake Tongue. However, his mind inexplicably trembled. He didn't care about anything else. His spirit body that had transformed into light deviated and flew backwards. However, the whistling sand and dust filled the air. When he crashed into it, the hole he had just entered through had already disappeared without a trace. When he crashed into it again, there was only emptiness. Gongqi was startled. Snake Tongue was only several meters away. It was like she was having an illogical nightmare. By the time she was slightly clear-headed, the shackles of the Veil of Silence were still there. Gongqi was also there, and he was very close at hand. All the torment hadn't caused any fundamental changes. It was just that the bloody light and mist interweaved in the clouds had turned into a gloomy place where dust and mist surged. Where is this? She had been trapped in the cloud world for half a year. Chaotic clouds and bloody light were everywhere as far as the eye could see. Snake Tongue really wasn't used to suddenly entering a realm with a different hue. All she knew was that this wasn't the banned city that she yearned for day and night. The dust and mist that fluttered in the sky shouldn't be the same as the fog wall that isolated her from the outside world. The powerful suction force had disappeared without a trace at some unknown time. Snake Tongue felt terrible. It wasn't just her emotions, but also her most intuitive feelings. Her spirit body was extremely weak. She had relied on a highly condensed method to prolong her life. But in this gloomy place, she felt that something was wrong. Her spirit body was erratic and unstable. Her core structure also showed signs of dispersing. She couldn't piece it back together no matter what. It seemed like in the next second, she would assimilate with the dust and mist that filled the sky. She would be torn apart and disintegrated. Chapter 782. A Trap. Gongqi immediately responded to Snake Tongue. His piercing thoughts carried a bit of ridicule, but the direction he pointed at was rather subtle. I originally thought it was an inside and outside collusion, but now it seems I was overthinking it. That lord of yours made you believe you could return to Ban City and merge your soul and body. In the end, he gave you a glimmer of hope and deceived you. Because of this, he also deceived me. Especially when you were comparing the two, your mentality was unbalanced. You made a hasty judgment amidst an unforeseen event, and your brain became hot-headed. Hee, what a good plan. In this terrible situation, Gongqi displayed his shrewdness and ruthlessness. He maintained his mentality quite well. At least in front of Snake Tongue, he maintained a calm attitude. He slowly moved over and looked at Snake Tongue, who was wrapped in the yarn of silence. She was shaped like a pearl of light, but she was even more fragile than a bubble. I never expected that there would be such a world beneath the boundless clouds. I deserve to be schemed against. But what about you, Snake Tongue? It's already hard to control your scattered spirit body. Instead, you have to rely on the yarn of silence to withstand it. It seems that Lord of yours doesn't take you seriously. In the end, you're nothing more than bait. After the big fish takes the bait, you're useless. Gong Qi's thoughts were like a blade. His words struck at the heart, and Snake Tongue's pearl of light fluctuated. As it swelled and shrank, it looked like it was about to shatter. In reality, her spirit body was heavily injured, and her spiritual will had suffered a blow. In addition to the vile environment, she was on the verge of death. Seeing this situation, Gong Qi furrowed his brows. He no longer provoked her. His previous words had been wasted. Gong Qi's original intention was to destroy Snake Tongue's mental defenses in one fell swoop in this desperate situation. He wanted her to remove the obstacle in her despair and fuse with the yarn of silence, removing the last hidden danger. This would make it convenient for him to focus all his attention on dealing with the great enemy. Unexpectedly, Snake Tongue was even more useless than he had imagined. In fact, it wasn't difficult to transform Snake Tongue into the yarn of silence at this moment. However, she was so weak that she was on the verge of collapse. She might not be able to withstand the impact of the transformation. Once the core structure of her spirit body was destroyed, what benefit would there be in swallowing her? If he wanted to satisfy both sides, he would inevitably have to focus his mind and do some meticulous work. This was simply an opportunity for the powerful enemy hidden behind the sandstorm. All sorts of thoughts revolved in Gong Qi's mind. In the end, he flicked his finger and sent a speck of light into the veil of silence. It changed slightly and poured some life force into Snake Tongue. It's better to keep it for now. After all, the connection between the soul and flesh is a clue. In this maze realm where the laws are in chaos and time and space are collapsing, I have to hold on to any thread. I can't lose it easily. But why hasn't the great enemy that lured me into the trap appeared? Ever since Gong Qi had entered this maze of sand and dust, he had been vigilantly searching at all times, attempting to use his mental senses to detect traces of the enemy, but to no avail. On the other hand, when he spread out his spiritual senses, they were tightly restrained and sluggish. This made him have some guesses. He casually picked up a grain of sand that was spinning past and carefully observed it. This particle was shaped like a grain of sand, but under the probing of soul force, one could see that its structure was so complicated that it made one's eyes pop out. It seemed to meander, it seemed to be transparent, it seemed like a layer, it seemed like a beehive, it seemed like the masterpiece of a miniature sculptor. When he tried to analyze it further and let his soul power seep in, there was a force within the sand that resisted and melted. Soon, the sand expanded slightly before shattering into even more indescribable fragments that mixed into the surrounding dust. He had seen this thing before. Gong Qi had already lived for nearly 100 years. He had experienced the vicissitudes of the 21st century, the age of distortion, the World War, the post-war revival, the construction of the inner world, and so on. The number of dead transcendents he had seen was several times more than the number of living transcendents. It wouldn't be a problem to say that he had seen and experienced a lot. His experience filled in his knowledge and helped him make judgments. Domain fragments. That's much more complicated, and there are far too many of them. Such strange objects weren't just 1 or 2 grains or 3 or 5 piles. Instead, they were scattered as far as the eye could see, boundless. Even if the crushed dust occupied an even vaster space, this quantity far exceeded the norm. Gong Qi tried to find the logic behind this exceeding the norm, and he quickly came up with a few guesses. It was these guesses that caused unprecedented waves to arise in his mind. What is this? Snake Tongue's thoughts drifted into his mind. She relied on Gong Qi's infusion of vital energy to forcefully stabilize her mind and awaken. She didn't want to mention the matter of food and bait again. She could only focus her limited mind on the key elements in front of her. Fortunately, she was close to Gong Qi and received some radiation effects. Otherwise, she would only be able to open her eyes wide and be blind in this treacherous area. Her weak soul force simply wouldn't be able to probe forward. Gong Qi straightforwardly answered Snake Tongue's doubts. This is a domain fragment. Domain fragment. Snake Tongue was absent-minded for a moment. Soon after, she emphasized the words in front of her. That's right. It's exactly what you think. If an extraordinary formed and solidified a domain in his peak state, Then he was forcefully killed and his domain shattered. What remains is this object. Gong Qi smiled and said, I heard that you grew up in the Hachiman Temple. Back then, the Amaterasu order swept through the archipelago. Those who complied with them flourished, and those who opposed them perished. I don't remember who that person from the main temple was. It said that he died in such a way. It seems that there are also such relics that are worshipped all year round. Perhaps you've seen them before. That's right. There were originally over 30 of them. However, they were the best divine objects for incantations. After repeated use over the years, they were eroded and worn away. When I left, there were less than 20 of them. Snake Tongue compared them to her memories. She matched them with great difficulty, but she was startled by the logic behind it. But there are too many here. According to this inference, how many extraordinaries had fallen in these scattered fragments? Hundreds? Thousands? Over 10,000? If this was truly the case, then all the extraordinary since the era of distortion added together would be nothing more than a fraction. They might not all be the relics of extraordinaries. If it's a plane like the deep blue world or a half-plane of a lower rank, it's still unknown. Didn't some people say that in a certain sense, domains and planes can be equated? Take Ouyang Chen's so-called logic world for example. 100 or so exploded in one go. Perhaps it's on a similar scale. Perhaps we're in a shattered world fragment. Of course, there's bound to be an even more fundamental space-time structure outside the fragment. Otherwise, where would we find a place to stand? But even so, the rules of space-time have already been destroyed. It forms an enormous suppression on the strength of outsiders. It's a good place to set up an ambush. This level of knowledge already surpassed the scope of Snake Tongue's common knowledge. If she heard it on an ordinary day, she would certainly firmly remember it and think of every method to get to the bottom of it. But in this current situation, she could only remain silent. At this time, Gong Qi suddenly laughed. Amidst his laughter, he extended his hand. His lustrous and translucent spirit body structure sufficiently interfered with the sandstorm dust mist, rippling with spirit waves. After several attempts, he opened his mouth again. In any case, this is a secret land of enormous value. It can make all the apex scientists and research organizations that study spacetime and planes go crazy. If it were me, I would hide this place tightly and not reveal the slightest bit of it. Then I would devote myself to research. But that person's methods are incomprehensible. Such meticulous planning step by step, and calculating our reactions perfectly. He's like a specter that hides by our side and monitors us for a long time. He knows our actions like the back of his hand, and he plans to target us. It wouldn't be strange for such a person to play any tricks. But he just had to use this part of the world as a trap. Moreover, he didn't make his move the instant we stepped into the trap. We missed a great opportunity. Why? Snake Tongue's train of thought was already led away by Gong Qi. That's because his strength isn't enough. Gong Qi directly concluded. Perhaps that person's treacherous methods are impossible to guard against, causing people to unconsciously raise their judgment of him. But the methods of doing things can't replace the rhythm. Especially the bright rhythm that belongs to the strong. It's possible that everything is linked together, but it definitely wouldn't be as sloppy as it is now. Clearly, he's counting on this maze realm to reduce my strength. It's just a pity that he doesn't understand the matters of the extraordinary plane. Snake Tongue could feel that the identity of the person Gong Qi spoke of was already on the verge of being revealed. She wasn't willing to play the role of a supporting character, but the accumulated emotions dictated her words and actions. Even if it would be very difficult for her to leave this place alive, she still had to figure out the identity of the so-called Lord that was toying with her in the palm of his hand. Who is he? You still haven't figured it out? You need to properly adjust your mentality. In such a sealed environment, there shouldn't be any extra clues or extra people. Therefore, the most likely person is the one that sent you here. Amidst the low voice, a vague image was imprinted in Snake Tongue's mind. The outline was gradually corrected, and it gradually became clear. She was about to blurt it out. Of course, in her current state, a pure thought reaction was more direct. But at this moment, the speed of the sand and dust in the surroundings suddenly increased. She originally had a tiny reaction from Gong Qi's spiritual wave radiation, but it was also disrupted. For Snake Tongue, the surroundings darkened. She couldn't hear a single sound. It was as if her entire body had been thrown into an endless black hole. Her mind suddenly tightened. A second later, a dim ray of light flooded over and illuminated her surroundings once more. But the source of this radiating light was no longer from Gong Qi. At the very least, it wasn't completely. At the border where the two layers of light interweaved, the fluttering sand and dust lost their usual trajectory. It seemed to ripple and distort, as if it were being grabbed by some invisible hand and pulled inward. Sand and dust rubbed and collided with each other. It even stimulated leaping sparks, forming a dynamic, chaotic scene of alternating light and darkness. And in this chaotic background, there were several relatively clear silhouettes condensed from the myriad grains of sand and dust. They formed the relief of a human face. The eyes and brows seemed familiar, and the fierce and penetrating rays of light directly illuminated her. Under the stimulation of the rays, Snake Tongue's disturbed thoughts suddenly took form. Chapter 783. Luo Nan. Snake Tongue obviously remembered Luo Nan. After all, it was this person who had thrown her into that misty world and trapped her in a city of worry. However, after spending half a year in the clouds, day by day, that person's face had more or less become a little blurry. She could only remember that he was a somewhat neurotic youth. His way of thinking was very different from ordinary people, and his mouth was full of strange theories. Moreover, when his emotions got the better of him, he could do anything. In Snake Tongue's mind, Luo Nan was a twisted and grotesque figure. He was similar to some sort of symbol, representing a terrible road sign in her life. But at this moment, seeing the relief face condensed in the dust, the symbolic impression suddenly became much more real. At least, this work in the dust and the whole process of its manifestation was deeply engraved in his mind, and it was difficult to forget. An exciting appearance. Gong Qi's telepathic thoughts shuttled back and forth in the rays of radiation on both sides, raising layers of tiny waves. Perhaps he wanted to disturb Luo Nan's sculpting process a bit, but in the end, it didn't happen. This thought only turned into a cold and heavy voice, appearing in the dust storm. In half a year's time, the growth of a young man is always astonishing. Luo Nan could not tell if this was an evaluation or a conversation. In any case, Luo Nan did not pay attention to it. Or perhaps this human face relief did not possess the ability to converse. Just as the long silence was about to devolve into awkwardness, Gong Qi cleverly shifted the direction of the conversation to Snake Tongue. Illusions will always be shattered, right? Snake Tongue understood the meaning of White House's words. It was she, Tank, and a group of people who had burned the works of Luo Nan's mother. It was also Luo Nan's revenge that caused her to lose herself in the clouds and fall into her current predicament. She hated Luo Nan, and it was impossible for Luo Nan to forgive her. Given this premise, there wouldn't be the slightest bit of kindness in the fusion of spirit and body that gave her the greatest hope. Was it despair? Snake Tongue only remained silent. However, the silence was quickly broken by an external force. A thought that was different from Gong Qi's penetrated in and restored a familiar voice in their consciousness. I'm sorry. The delay in long-distance communication here is much longer than I thought. Luo Nan. Gong Qi's telepathic thoughts were severed as he responded. It's me. The so-called delay was completely absent from the conversation. Only the dust and sand billowed, and the human face relief in the middle steadily occupied a region. Moreover, it was obvious that a different kind of power had been injected into it. Even when the surrounding environment was in turmoil, it still showed very vivid details. This was especially so for the pair of eyes that were pieced together from an unknown amount of dust and sand. They opened and closed almost naturally, as if they were shining with a cold light. They projected hatred and murderous intent without reservation. Oh, I shouldn't have been so polite. What I should say is, Old thief Gong Qi, your time of death has come. Gong Qi wasn't easily provoked into anger. Luo Nan's words and actions were very much in line with the temperament of a young man. However, how could a guy who could endure for half a year to set up an ambush and successfully trick him into a trap be a simple teenager? He continued to sense the surrounding environment, probing the real situation and probing Luo Nan at the same time. Is there only you here? The human-faced relief only stared coldly. Gong Qi laughed involuntarily. Yes, I can imagine. For Ouyang Chen and Wu Jiong to take a fancy to him, there was no need to say more about his potential. From your ability to control this sandstorm, I can see about 70% to 80% of it. However, you're far from learning their magnanimity. You don't know how to share. Such a good place. Luo Nan's face within the dust and mist also laughed. He was most likely amused by Gong Qi's outlandish words. Share this world with you? What about Ouyang Chen and Wu Jiong? Gong Qi strode forward. He was clearly treading on nothingness, but it was as if he was walking on a shady path. He was calm and at ease, at least on the surface. I dare to assert that you absolutely haven't told Ouyang Chen and Wu Jiong about this secret. Otherwise I would have... No, I would have run into those two long ago. That's true. A smile was drawn on Luo Nan's human face relief. He faced Gong Qi, who was gradually approaching, steadily and unwaveringly. Gong Qi spat softly. It's good for a young man to have perseverance and willpower, but if you do it too much, you'll become stubborn. Take you for example. What's the point of hiding this secret? You're just a watchdog that guards the door and eats. I wasn't able to enter before, but now that I've entered, what can you do? Luo Nan's response had just begun when a green-gray radiance suddenly flashed above Gong Qi's spirit body, who was less than 20 meters away. It was as if a rainbow light blade had cut through the air. It sliced diagonally across the human face relief, cleaving it in half. The human face relief collapsed, and the dust and mist sandstorm behind it exploded with a rumble. It formed a momentary turbulence, but it was immediately crushed by the even more tyrannical storm surrounding it. The exquisite work of relief was annihilated without a trace in the short span of a second. It really is a long-distance projection. But do you really think I can't see through your trick of crossing the sea and deceiving the heavens? The green-gray smoke flowed back around Gong Qi's body, swirling around his body. This was a layer of pure essence energy formed from the intersection of life and death. If Gong Qi could truly capture Luo Nan's location, regardless of whether it was his fleshly body or his spiritual body, Gong Qi would be able to pursue and infiltrate Luo Nan's body until Luo Nan died. As for that sneak attack that lacked the demeanor of an expert, he had already reached this point. Demeanor my ass. Gong Qi was already extremely decisive. Unfortunately, Luo Nan was much more cautious than he imagined. Luo Nan was also much more brilliant. Luo Nan was actually able to transmit power from a long distance within this sealed void. Luo Nan was even able to perform such exquisite work. From this it could be seen that it seems that you've put quite a bit of effort into this maze realm for you to be able to twist the domain fragments into a flower. Moreover, there is certainly a special structural pattern. Did your arrangements in the surroundings come from this? But if you think that you can trap and kill me here with just this, you're indulging in the wildest fantasies. The green-gray smoke outside Gong Qi's body spread out once more as he spoke. Layer by layer, it seeped into the dust and mist sandstorm. Smoke and dust exploded everywhere it passed. Lightning was faintly discernible. It was vaguely similar to the scene of Luo Nan molding the human face relief. It was just that what Gong Qi made wasn't a tangible object that could be discerned with a glance. Instead, it was a layer of curtains that flowed along with the dust and mist sandstorm. The curtains were woven from domain fragments that were like dust and sand. What Gong Qi did was to eliminate the impurities and extract the essence, leaving behind only the structure that was useful to him. It wasn't as refined and detailed as Luo Nan's, but it had its own tyrannical laws lying across it. And all of this was under the control of Gong Qi's will. There are many things in the extraordinary level. Imagination alone is far from enough. Extraordinary. Domain. Snake Tongue recognized this powerful power that belonged exclusively to extraordinaries. She was also covered within the curtains. Although she was in her weakest state, and her active perception was practically non-existent, she was still somewhat sensitive to the radiance radiating in from the outside world. The probing situation of radiation radiating from both sides revealed a one-sided situation the instant Gong Qi established his extraordinary domain. The radiance that came from Luo Nan was simply crushed and covered, no longer leaving a trace. But then again, that face and that penetrating, fierce and penetrating radiance still lingered in her mind. It wasn't destroyed by Gong Qi's oppressive power. In fact, it became even more vivid. He's still here. This thought inexplicably flashed through Snake Tongue's mind. Before she could find a basis for it, an external force acted upon her and manifested on the plane of consciousness. Indeed, there are some things that I don't quite understand. The curtains erected by Gong Qi weren't able to isolate Luo Nan's telepathic transmission. At most, they formed a few insignificant noises. From Snake Tongue's perspective, this couldn't even compare to the confusion created by Luo Nan's words. From my understanding, the strength of extraordinaries, yes, I'm talking about the mental side, is mostly built upon the powerful grasp of the energy storm of the abyssal region. Especially after establishing a solidified configuration. The stable and efficient energy utilization mode and interference mode can practically provide an inexhaustible amount of power. Constructing a so-called domain with its own unique rules on this foundation is just a test of logical ability. Am I right? Snake Tongue's train of thought had already been blocked by special terms like the solidified configuration. In comparison, Gong Qi was able to understand without any hindrance by combining his own experience. But it was precisely because he understood that he couldn't help but be astonished. Luo Nan was still underage. For this type of up-and-coming talent, it was already outstanding for his soul strength to reach the middle zone. But why did this kid seem to be so familiar with the abyssal region? Half a second later, Gong Qi discovered that he was astonished too early. Actually, I don't really understand the mysteries of the abyssal region. I also don't know where that majestic power originates from. I only know that the abyssal region is densely covered with undercurrents, just like the boundless ocean of the deep sea. But the sea is vast and has a boundary. I don't really understand the definition of a boundary. I just know that the power of the Earth's abyssal region doesn't naturally extend to the clouds. Here's the problem. Deputy Secretary General Gong. According to my observations, you've been affected by the sealed spacetime. It's hard for you to utilize the solidified configuration of the Earth's abyssal region. Your strength has been affected a bit, but you haven't reconstructed your configuration in the Cloud End Abyss region. Even if it's only a temporary one. Why? Gong Qi was silent for a moment before asking in reply, yeah, why? I'll call you an old thief because you haven't given up on your evil intentions. Every day, you sense the aura of the solidified configuration that belongs solely to you within the Earth's abyssal region. You pass through the polar domain. That place is high up and illusory. It's transparent and unobstructed. It's like the vacuum of the atmosphere. It isn't obstructed by the barriers of spacetime. Especially with the sun rising from the clouds these past few months. With a reference, your sense of direction should be much stronger, right? If I give you a few more months of time, who knows what you'll be able to do? Gong Qi didn't speak again. In this moment, he restrained all the meaningless reflections of his expression. He just stared with a heavy gaze at the howling dust mist and sandstorm outside the tent. It was as if he wanted to capture the image of Luo Nan's existence from within. Luo Nan's human face relief had been chopped to pieces by Gong Qi, but the lines of the young man's eyes and brows were carved into him bit by bit through these difficult and heart-piercing words. Some of them had even broken his flesh and splashed blood, burning with pain. Chapter 784. Was that really Luo Nan in front of him? Gong Qiling's thoughts interweaved and changed. He instinctively wanted to change his previous judgment. This was because what he had experienced so far had already broken away from the common sense constructed over the course of his nearly 100 years of life. A young man who had just stepped into the inner world circle, had a deep understanding of the abyss region and the polar realm. It could be explained as a parrot parroting, used specifically to deceive others. But how did Luo Nan accurately grasp the activity of his mental senses come about? Even if it was not completely correct, there was no problem in grasping the trend. Even Gong Qiling himself had never thought about how to grasp the movement trend of a mental type extraordinary without alarming the target. Aside from years of patient observation and meticulous analysis, there was certainly an extremely high-end observation method. Was there such a method in this world? Was that kid really just a little doggy who overestimated his own capabilities and protected his own food? Were the shadows of Ouyang Chen and Wu Jiong hiding behind him? That wasn't right. This wasn't the style of those two at all. Gong Qiling's thoughts were a chaotic mess for a time. There was no fixed conclusion. When he first came to Xia City, he had gone for the exchange of benefits. The 2,000s of deep blue shares and the absolute secret behind An Wang and the Order of Justice's actions were the things he valued. As for Luo Nan, he just happened to be in a crucial position. He needed to gather information from there. He did not place much importance on him. He just wanted to look at the information. Even though he had fallen into the cloud world and struggled to get out, he had no way of figuring out Luo Nan, a key character. Now that the two sides had collided, he confirmed once more that his understanding of this young man was far from enough, especially when he relied on common sense and logic. It was hard for him to reach a normal conclusion. It was like he had bumped into a dense fog of nothingness. He was completely unable to ascertain what was inside. Perhaps it was empty. Perhaps it was filled with poison. Perhaps it was mixed together with the dust, fog, and sandstorm. The enemy knows me, but I don't know the enemy. There was nothing worse than this from a purely situational point of view. As his thoughts changed, the tent that was spread out within the dust, fog, and sandstorm slowly retracted, representing Gong Qiling's gradual change in attitude. He needed to gather more information. He needed to have more conversations with this young man. With this thought, the noise caused by the interference of the domain was greatly reduced, and the other's thoughts were transmitted again, seemingly ready to have a long talk. Actually, I feel that there is another reason why you haven't reconstructed your solid configuration in the cloud world, other than eliminating the interference. I'm not an extraordinary. This is just a wild guess. You can evaluate it and see if it's correct. Gong Qi appeared to be quite interested. Tell me about it. I'm just thinking that maybe Deputy Secretary General Gong wants to recreate the solidified configuration of the abyss area on Earth in this cloud world, but he's not willing to, but he can't. For a moment, the curtain that was floating in the dust storm froze. The manifestation of Luo Nan's telepathic thoughts grew clearer and clearer. It should be the effects and limitations of the fleshly body. According to the sparse knowledge I have regarding extraordinaries, the balance of the structure of body and soul, as well as the relationship of interference, are extremely important. Even for the mental side, the accumulation of the fleshly body is very necessary. Correspondingly, if I were to form a solidified configuration in the abyss region, both the body and the soul cannot be neglected. In this case, if the connection between body and soul is severed, it would be a rather troublesome matter to start anew. A single mishap would result in a conflict between the two, and the foundation would be damaged. Therefore, you'd rather expend a bit more effort to temporarily organize and operate the structure in the clouds. You'd give up a few highly effective methods in order to ensure the purity of the foundation. This way you can avoid the consequences of creating an odd shape. Of course, these are all my guesses. I still need to verify them. Based on the principle of body and soul cannot be neglected, my spiritual body can't court death in the cloud world. My fleshly body can't cause any trouble on Earth. Admittedly, this is stable, but without stimulation, the progress isn't too ideal. Speaking of which, Deputy Secretary General Gong has been away from Earth for half a year. Do you know what the situation is over there? What situation is Chan City? Yes, and what situation is the island where you're hiding in seclusion? Gong Qi's spiritual body's pupils congealed like ice when he heard these three situations. At this moment, he even wanted to create an explosion and completely crush the young man who was still hidden behind the nothingness. But he didn't do that. The young man's thoughts were still transmitted, but it no longer turned into vibrating sound waves. Instead, it controlled some of the sand and dust, as if it was going to remake the human face sculpture. No, it was going to look different. The outline of the image was zigzagging and disorderly. After spreading out, looking at the familiar distribution of land and sea, it was clearly a map of the world. Moreover, as the details were carved, the image gradually changed, showing more detailed and realistic curvature. A few seconds later, it had curled into the shape of a miniature Earth about half a meter in diameter, spinning silently in the sky full of sand. Suddenly, the temporary globe stopped spinning, and the slightly concave area that corresponded to the Pacific Ocean was facing Gong Qi. To be precise, it was in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, in the seemingly inconspicuous archipelago area. After another half a second, the entire sphere greatly swelled and deformed, thus achieving the effect of zooming, highlighting the details of a special area in the archipelago area. It's here, right? This is the feast that I've prepared for you for half a year. Please enjoy it. Boom! Gongqi finally did what he had always wanted to do. He created an astonishing explosion within the sandstorm of dust and fog, tearing apart the globe used for the demonstration. He also crushed everything within the range of his power, everything that was not pleasing to the eye. The problem was that no matter how berserk Gongqi unleashed within the misty labyrinth in the distant clouds, no matter how violent his attacks were, no matter how violent his emotions were, he was unable to find a way out before the barrier that separated the two places. The power he stirred up was destined to be unable to affect the local space-time of the Earth in the slightest. So, Luo Nan's posture didn't change at all on the Ray yacht at Northern Mountain Lake. He really hadn't cast his true body, including his spiritual body, into the cloud world. He would rather spend a bit more energy to communicate with his projection. Gongqi's words were correct. It was impossible to trap and kill him like this, but there was still a follow-up. Luo Nan wasn't just trying to scare Gongqi. Le quietly walked in and delivered fragrant coffee. At the same time she spoke by his ear. The madam has already arrived at the predetermined location. I know. Luo Nan looked at the time displayed in the lower right corner of the projection area. Today was May 2nd, Thursday. It wasn't a special day. The students of Acumen College were all in class, and he was quite unqualified as an older brother. He urged his little sister to skip class. Ru Wen had arrived at the underground laboratory of gear early in the morning. She had organized all of her equipment, and when Luo Nan's command was issued, she held onto the assembly box that was taller than her head. She lowered her head slightly. She abandoned her own senses at this moment, allowing Luo Nan's soul cloak's vast field of view to replace her. She relied on the soul cloak's positioning to lock onto the location of the volcanic archipelago in the middle of the ocean from a distance of 8,000 kilometers away. Chapter 785. In April and May, Chan City was considered the lightest season of the year. The dry season had just begun, so hurricanes were rare. The seas on the island were calm, and there were very few tourists. Even the most deadly rush tide was missed. Because of this period of time was affectionately called seclusion season by the members of the headquarters. Since the end of March, a considerable number of ability users had applied to enter Volcano Island for seclusion. It wasn't overcrowded, but at the very least, the seclusion rooms on the island, especially those high-quality areas, were in short supply. These days were painful and happy for the senior security expert Wolf, who was also the head of the security team. He would always miss the best time for cultivation because of the heavy duty on duty, but he would get some extra benefits because of his key position. Relying on this unique circumstance, he became a veteran B-class expert. However, perhaps it was also because of this circumstance that he was still a veteran B-class expert. It was currently the middle of the afternoon in Chan City. The weather wasn't too good. It had been raining since the morning. It was different from the torrential rain that usually passed by in a moment during the day. The rain was intermittent. Wolf felt a bit uncomfortable after being cooped up in his room for a long time. He took his two subordinates and patrolled the island reef area, checking the security equipment and the situation of the enchantments. The island reef area was filled with powerful people from the society and various powers of the inner world. Many people had taboo when it came to cultivation, so there were all kinds of restricted areas. Things like entering and flying were prohibited. The rules were very strict. Even the security team had to follow them. It wasn't easy for them to walk around, so they relied on idle chatter to get by. Before this, the hot headlines of Xia City and Sokka City had given them something to talk about. They also calculated that with the speed of the Flying Devil Ray, it would only take 2.5 hours to get from Xia City to Chan City. Next, Assistant A gestured on the security zone map. While chatting, he pointed out, luckily, Langdon can finally avoid the 13th zone this year. Assistant B whistled, then after the qualification test, he'll have to find a new number. How tiring. Wolf knew the tricks of his two assistants, so he said, next, we'll go to the 13th zone. Assistant A and Assistant B groaned. Captain, for the sake of the weather. We'll go through the 13th zone and pass quickly. The two assistants' worries turned into joy. Oh, smart. No, brilliant. Repairing equipment and wards had always been hard work. The equipment was fine, but when it came to high-end wards, well, it was more popular nowadays to call it configuration knowledge. It always gave the security team a headache. Wolf was an expert in this field. He knew the importance of daily patrols for security work, but since there was no one in District 13 this year, there was no need to torture his subordinates. The patrol was coming to an end. The three of them chatted as they moved forward. They naturally talked about the reason why the 13th sector was empty this year. Assistant A casually clicked on last month's report. It's been more than 4 months. The legendary plane is still a legend. Volcanic Island's quarterly income has dropped by almost 5%. Now, those bosses would rather drink the wind in the Pacific Ocean than come back to meditate and train. Rolf calmly replied, high-level seclusion areas are still in short supply. Moreover, extraordinaries can use it for free, but B-class and below don't have such treatment. Hey, Captain, year-end performance has nothing to do with rent. In terms of consumables, extraordinaries crush architects. Architects are also different from awakened ones. But you have Langdon. Not just one Langdon. This sentence made Assistant A choke back his complaints. Rolf didn't say anything more. If he continued, it would involve the security team's gray income area, which wouldn't be good for anyone. He had been on duty at Volcanic Island for 3 years. It was very likely that he would be transferred at the end of the year or early next year. There was no need to be the bad guy for this kind of thing. He returned to the topic of searching for a new plane. In the South Pacific region, there are endless clues about a new plane. Deputy Secretary General Gong's aura is like this rain, appearing and disappearing. It's said that there are also traces of ape-like creatures unique to that plane. It's only right for the boss to go and search. At least it can shut those busybodies up. Assistant A was a bit gossipy. Along the way, I heard that Toyama Auction House is very generous. Will President Abner and the others attend the Jade Lights High Seas auction? Toyama doesn't have that much influence. But someone did. Rolf gave an ambiguous answer and then said, because of this, Chan needs 2 more layers of blankets when it catches a cold. There are city guards in the main city, but there's only us on Volcanic Island. If any mutated reptiles crawl in, Assistant B shuddered. It will face the anger of hundreds of architects and even extraordinaries. If they do, I can deduct your performance right now. Pretend I didn't say anything. Assistant B also shut up. The corner of Rolf's mouth twitched. In the end, he couldn't help but complain. The association needs to hire a professional manager for Volcanic Island. How about poaching from intercontinental hotels? Due to the special function of Volcanic Island, there was a phenomenon of the strength of the users and the defenders here being inverted. The security team inevitably changed to a service type, providing consumables, maintaining the barrier, and at most providing the first wave of warnings. In short, he was just an assistant. His responsibility was greater than the heavens, but the one doing the work was an ant. It was fine if nothing happened, but once something did happen, he would be the scapegoat. No matter how rich the gray income was, Rolf did not have any attachment to it. After chatting for a while, he thought of business. Remember the partial upgrade in 2 days? How could I forget this? Assistant B bent his finger. Upgrading Mr. Gong Chi's seclusion area. The constructor is Ms. Dollar, and the inspector is President Abner. There are 3 extraordinaries. Choose one out of the 3. No matter which one you choose to provoke, it'll be a dead end. But isn't this a compulsory topic? Assistant A responded coldly. It said that Mr. Gong seemed to have chewed a large piece of raw mustard at the consultation meeting last week. If Deputy Secret Director Gong comes back, it might be our turn to eat mustard. At this point, the conversation became a little awkward. They all knew that the so-called upgrade of the seclusion area was the installation of visual monitoring and interference precision perception systems. In other words, it was to carry out omnidirectional surveillance without any blind spots. Be it in terms of privacy or safety, this was unacceptable to any seclusion person, let alone Gong Chi, the Deputy Secretary General of the Association. However, Gong Chi had been in seclusion for too long. It was almost certain that his soul had left his body and entered another plane. What was left in the seclusion area was only an empty shell of a physical body. In this state, he couldn't raise any objections. And under the stimulation of the benefits of the new plane, the attitudes of his various relatives, friends, and allies became more and more ambiguous. Until the upgrade motion was passed. Regarding this, Wolf, the natural scapegoat, was worried. I hope the end of the plane incident can be delayed. It would be more appropriate for me to resign next year. Of course, if there was a breakthrough in these 2 days, there wouldn't be a need for this. It would be a perfect dream. Sighing, he raised his head, and a dark red stream of light flashed above his head. He made a wish at the shooting star. Huh? Wolf's eyes widened to the point that raindrops dripped into his eyes. Yes, there were still dark rain clouds above his head, but that light. His bracelet vibrated, and the security warning system lit up with a yellow light, which meant that a non-direct threat was approaching or had been nearby. Wolf raised his head and spoke to his men in the duty room. Report the target. Boss, a high-energy ray shot down from the sky, brushed past the no-fly zone in the 4th zone, and drilled into the bottom of the sea. It's about 30 kilometers away from the island's warning line. Maybe it's a high-power laser. Is there any damage to the barrier? There's a hole, but it can repair itself. Ask Chan's garrison if there are any related exercises. Definitely not, or we would have received the news. What about the Star Alliance? Their space fleet? When those people were cleaning up the space junk, the main cannon would occasionally fire. At least that's what the public report said. The military committee's consultation platform is habitually disconnected. Oh damn. The man in the duty room spoke more quickly. There's a strong reaction at the bottom of the sea. The energy index, no. There's interference reaction at the swamp area. The instrument average is 1.7 dg and the extreme is 2.3 dg. Preliminary estimate is a fully evolved B-class mutant. Beside him, Assistant A said, if it's a B-class individual, there's no threat. Mutants often pass through the surrounding waters. Maybe they were stimulated by the laser? Maybe. Wolf was already numb to these kinds of things. He didn't even need to think, and a plan popped up in his mind. The self-healing of the barrier is too slow. Group 4 deal with it. As for the sea, take the image first and prepare the inducer. It's best if there's no conflict. But if there are some ladies and gentlemen who like specimens, we can consider it later. As he spoke, the originally pitter-patter of rain became heavier, and a thin layer of fog had appeared between the islands. The wind blew the rain, and the fog assaulted their faces, slightly obscuring their vision. Wolf exhaled with the intention of blowing the fog away, but for some reason, the flow of the fog was not disturbed at all. It was a strange contrast to the strands of rain that were deflected by the force. Wolf was stunned. He suddenly felt a sense of déjà vu, as if he had experienced this before. It was also at this moment that the underwater camera equipment set up in the distant waters moved into position and transferred the image of the mutant that had suddenly appeared over. The moment the image appeared, Wolf made a clear judgment. This thing doesn't look like a marine mutant. It looks more like a big ape. As soon as this thought rose and fell, the ape creature with a body as dark as blood leaped into the sea and instantly escaped from the surveillance area. At this time, the man in the duty room followed up with a report. The target mutant jumped out of the sea. It's calling. There was no need for his subordinate to say anything more. Wolf could already capture the powerful shockwave that was pressing in from afar. It wasn't just the energy transmission of air molecules, but a powerful turbulence that involved the level of the swamp area. It had astonishing penetrative power. Even though it was weakened by the barrier of the islands during the transmission process, there were still aftershocks that seeped through. For a moment, the security system's alarms rang incessantly. It was unknown how many barriers and warning systems in sensitive areas were activated. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.